Noah Hayes thought stopping for gas at midnight would be the simplest part of his drive home. He was wrong. Within minutes, he'd be facing armed robbers, discovering an FBI undercover operation, and making a split-second decision that would change everything. This is the story of a single father who stepped into the crossfire, only to find out the real danger was just beginning. Stay with me until the end and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. The rain hammered down like bullets against the roof of Noah Hayes' pickup truck, each drop exploding on impact with a fury that matched the storm churning in his chest. It was 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday in late October, and the Georgia highway stretched before him like a black river, slick and treacherous under the sweep of his headlights. He'd been driving for 3 hours straight, his daughter Maddie asleep in the back seat, her small chest rising and falling beneath her favorite purple blanket, the one with the cartoon rabbits that she'd had since she was 3. Noah's hands gripped the steering wheel with the kind of tension that comes from exhaustion, layered over hypervigilance, a combination he'd never quite shaken since Afghanistan. His knuckles were white, the tendons standing out like cables under his skin. He was 36 years old, but some days he felt twice that, the kind of tired that sleep couldn't fix, the kind that lived in your bones. The fuel gauge blinked its orange warning for the third time, pulling him from his thoughts. He'd been ignoring it for the last 20 miles, hoping to push through to the next town, but Maddie had school in the morning and he had a shift at the garage at 6 a.m. He couldn't afford to run out of gas on some back road with his 7-year-old daughter in the car. "Come on, baby," he muttered to the truck, scanning the darkness for any sign of civilization. "Just a little further." As if in answer, a beacon of fluorescent light appeared through the rain-soaked windshield. A gas station, isolated and bright against the night like a lighthouse in a storm. The sign read, "Redmond's Stop and Go," in letters that had probably been read once, but had faded to a dull pink. It was the kind of place that existed in the gaps between towns, serving long-haul truckers, insomniacs, and people like Noah who just needed to get home. He pulled into the station, the tires hissing through puddles that reflected the harsh overhead lights. The place looked deserted except for a single car parked near the air pump, a beat-up Honda Civic with a college parking sticker on the back window. Noah cut the engine and sat for a moment, listening to the rain drum against the metal roof, watching Maddie sleep in the rearview mirror. She looked so peaceful, so safe. It was the only time she didn't wear that worried expression she'd developed over the last year, the one that made her look too old for 7, the one that appeared whenever she heard him on the phone with bill collectors or watched him count change for groceries. The expression that told him she understood more than any child should have to. Noah reached back and adjusted her blanket, tucking it around her shoulders. "I'll be right back, baby bird," he whispered, though she couldn't hear him. It was what he always said, a promise, a prayer. He climbed out of the truck, immediately getting soaked despite the awning that extended from the building. The rain was coming down sideways now, driven by wind that tasted of ozone and autumn leaves. Noah hunched his shoulders and jogged toward the entrance, his boots splashing through puddles that reflected the neon beer signs in the windows. The electronic chime announced his arrival, a cheerful ding-dong that felt absurdly normal. Inside, the station was exactly what he'd expected. 3 aisles of overpriced snacks, a coffee station that looked like it had been brewing since the Clinton administration, and a wall of refrigerators humming with energy drinks and cheap beer. The air smelled like hot dogs that had been rotating on their rack for an indeterminate number of hours, and pine-scented cleaning solution that didn't quite mask the underlying odor of old cigarette smoke. Behind the counter stood a woman in her early 30s, blonde hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, wearing the standard-issue polo shirt with Redmonds embroidered over the breast pocket. She was reading something on her phone, her face illuminated by its blue glow. She glanced up when Noah entered, gave him a quick professional smile, then returned to her phone. Noah nodded in acknowledgement and headed for the coffee station. He needed caffeine more than oxygen right now. The coffee looked like motor oil and probably tasted worse, but he poured himself a large cup anyway, adding enough sugar to make it palatable. The warmth of the cup felt good in his hands, grounding him, pulling him back from the edge of exhaustion where his mind had been teetering. He grabbed a package of powdered donuts for Maddie, her favorite, though he'd never let her have them for breakfast on a school day, and a bottle of water for himself. As he approached the counter, he studied the clerk with the kind of assessment that had become second nature during his 3 tours overseas. She was fit, he noticed. Not gym fit, but the kind of lean muscle that came from actual physical work. Her posture was good, shoulders back, weight balanced on both feet. When she looked up at him again, her eyes did a quick scan of his face, his hands, his build, before settling on a polite, neutral expression. "Just these and 40 on pump 3, Noah said, setting the items on the counter and pulling out his wallet. "Long night?" the clerk asked, ringing up his purchases. Her voice was pleasant, professional, with just a hint of southern drought that suggested she was local. "Long drive," Noah replied. He swiped his debit card, mentally calculating how much this would leave him for the rest of the week. "Heading home." "Well, drive safe out there. This storm's supposed to get worse before it gets better." She handed him his receipt, and that's when Noah noticed her hands. The nails were trimmed short, practical. But it was her palms that caught his attention. There were calluses there, the kind you got from gripping things, from weapon handling. Noah's internal alarm system, the one that had kept him alive in Kandahar and Helmand province, began to quietly buzz. He glanced at the clerk again, reassessing. She met his eyes steadily, and for just a fraction of a second he saw something there that didn't match the bored gas station employee persona. A sharpness, an awareness. He was being paranoid, he told himself. This was Georgia, not Afghanistan. Not everyone with calloused hands was a soldier or a threat. Maybe she did CrossFit. Maybe she worked on a farm. Maybe... The electronic chime dinged again, and Noah's entire body went rigid. 2 men in black ski masks burst through the entrance, and the world shifted into that crystalline clarity that Noah had experienced in combat. Time slowing down, details sharpening, instincts taking over from conscious thought. The first man was approximately 6 feet tall, heavy build, wearing a black hoodie and jeans. He carried what looked like a Glock 19 in his right hand, held sideways in the grip that screamed amateur. The second man was shorter, wiry, with a silver revolver that looked like a .38 special, held more confidently, suggesting at least some familiarity with firearms. "Everybody down!" the first man screamed, his voice cracking with either adrenaline or inexperience. "This is a robbery! Down on the ground now!" Noah's mind was already running through scenarios, calculating angles and distances the way he'd been trained to do. The door was 12 feet behind him. His truck was 30 feet from the entrance. Maddie was in the truck. The clerk was 10 feet away, behind a counter that might or might not stop a bullet. The 2 men were spread apart, tactical mistake on their part, giving him multiple vectors to consider. But the thing that made Noah's blood turn to ice wasn't the guns or the masks. It was the fact that the second robber, the one with the .38, had turned immediately toward the windows, positioning himself where he could see both the parking lot and the interior of the store. They weren't amateurs looking for quick cash. This was planned. They'd positioned themselves to control the space, to prevent escape, to maintain visual contact with potential threats outside. And Maddie was outside. "I said down!" the first robber shouted, advancing toward Noah, waving his gun with the kind of jerky movements that suggested he was seconds away from accidentally pulling the trigger. "On the ground! Now!" Noah raised his hands slowly, making himself appear compliant while his mind continued to process information at light speed. He sank to one knee, then the other, lowering himself to the grimy linoleum floor that smelled like spilled soda and tracked in rain. The cold seeped through his jeans immediately. "Phone and wallet. Slide them over here." The first robber was practically vibrating with nervous energy. "You!" He swung toward the clerk. "Open the register. All the cash. Move it." Noah watched the clerk from his position on the floor. This was the moment that would tell him everything he needed to know. A normal person would be terrified right now, shaking, crying, fumbling with the register. The clerk did none of those things. She raised her hands, yes. She moved toward the register, yes. But her movements were too controlled, too measured. When she walked, Noah noticed her feet maintained perfect balance. Her weight distributed in a way that would allow her to move in any direction instantly. And her eyes were doing exactly what Noah's were doing, calculating, assessing, planning. She wasn't a clerk. Or rather, She was more than a clerk. "Hurry up!" the first robber yelled, slamming his gun hand on the counter. The weapon discharged with a deafening bang that made Noah's ears ring, the bullet punching through the ceiling tiles and sending a shower of acoustic material down like snow. The robber stared at his gun in shock, clearly not having meant to fire it. "Shit! Shit! 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 Control your weapon, you idiot!" the second robber hissed from his position by the window. His voice was different, calmer, more educated. "And watch the civilian." Civilian. The military terminology wasn't lost on Noah. The clerk used the moment of distraction to hit the register release, the drawer popping open with a mechanical ding that sounded obscene in the aftermath of the gunshot. She began pulling out bills with shaking hands, and that's when Noah knew for certain she was faking. Her hands were shaking exactly enough to sell the frightened employee routine, but not so much that she couldn't grab a weapon if she needed to. Noah's eyes flicked to the security mirror mounted in the corner. In its convex reflection, he could see the second robber more clearly. The man was checking his watch, not glancing at it, but checking it deliberately, as if he was on a timeline, as if he was expecting something. This wasn't a robbery. Or rather, it was a robbery, but it was something else too. Something bigger. Noah had walked into the middle of an operation, and Maddie was outside in the truck, vulnerable and alone. He had to act, but he had to be smart about it. The first robber approached the counter, a plastic bag in his free hand, gun still waving wildly. "Fill it up, all of it. I know there's more back there. Don't hold out on me." Noah shifted his weight slowly, preparing. The second robber was still watching the windows, his back partially to the interior. The first robber was focused entirely on the clerk and the cash. It was a window. A small one, maybe 5 seconds, but it was all Noah would get. He thought of Maddie sleeping in the truck. He thought of the promise he'd made at her mother's grave 2 years ago, the promise that he would always protect her, always keep her safe, no matter what. The clerk's eyes met his for a fraction of a second. And in that moment, Noah saw recognition. She knew he was military. She knew he was assessing the situation the same way she was, and somehow, impossibly, she gave him the tiniest shake of her head. "Don't," her eyes said. "Not yet." But Noah wasn't taking orders anymore. He'd stopped taking orders the day he'd come home to find his wife dead from an overdose, and his 3-year-old daughter crying in her crib, unchanged for hours. He made his own decisions now. The first robber reached for the bag of cash the clerk was holding out, his attention completely focused on the money. His gun hand dropped slightly, the barrel pointing at the floor for just a second. Noah exploded into motion. Years of training and combat experience took over, his body moving with a precision and speed that had been drilled into him through countless hours of practice. He surged up from the floor, closing the 10 feet to the counter in 3 explosive strides, his boots finding purchase on the wet linoleum despite the risk of slipping. The first robber's eyes went wide behind his mask as he registered the movement, but he was too slow, too inexperienced. Noah's right hand shot out and grabbed the robber's gun hand at the wrist, his grip like a steel trap, controlling the weapon and directing it away from any potential targets. Simultaneously, his left hand came up in a palm strike that caught the robber square in the center of his masked face, snapping his head back with a sickening crack that might have been the mask's plastic framework breaking or might have been the man's nose. Noah didn't care which. The robber went down hard, his legs tangling with each other as he tried to process what had just happened. Noah maintained his grip on the gun hand, twisting it with practiced efficiency, applying pressure to the specific points that would make the fingers release their grip without him having to fight for the weapon. The Glock clattered to the floor, spinning away across the wet linoleum. "Gun!" the second robber shouted, swinging his revolver toward Noah. But the clerk was already moving. With a speed and fluidity that confirmed every suspicion Noah had harbored, she ducked below the counter and came up with a Glock 22 in her hands, not from the cash register, but from a hidden holster that must have been mounted underneath the counter. Her stance was perfect, her grip textbook, and the small gold badge that suddenly appeared clipped to her belt caught the fluorescent light. "FBI, drop your weapon!" she shouted, her voice completely different now, hard, commanding, authoritative. "Drop it now!" The second robber froze, his revolver caught between targets. Noah, still controlling the first robber on the ground, watched the man's eyes dart between the FBI agent and the door, calculating his odds. "Don't even think about it. the agent warned. My backup is already surrounding this location. You're done. Put the gun down and get on the ground. For a long moment, everything hung in balance. Noah could hear the rain pounding on the roof, the hum of the refrigerators, the first robber's labored breathing beneath him, and the thundering of his own heart. The second robber's finger tensed on the trigger. Noah shifted his weight, preparing to throw himself to the side, to give the agent a clear shot, but before he could move, the sound of screeching tires cut through the tension. Through the window, Noah saw a black van whip into the parking lot, hydroplaning slightly on the wet pavement. The second robber's eyes lit up. Now, he shouted. And then several things happened at once. The second robber fired, not at Noah or the agent, but at the window, the glass exploding outward in a crystalline spray. He dove through the opening, rolling as he hit the wet pavement outside. The agent fired back, two controlled shots that punched through the space where the robber had been a second before, embedding themselves in the wall. The first robber, still on the ground beneath Noah, started thrashing wildly, trying to break free. And through it all, Noah's mind was screaming one word over and over, Maddie. He released the first robber, scrambled for the dropped Glock, and sprinted for the door. Behind him, he heard the agent shouting into a radio, Suspect fleeing eastbound. Van in the lot. Move in. Move in. But he didn't stop. His daughter was in the parking lot, where gunshots had just been fired and a van had just appeared, and nothing else in the world mattered. Noah burst through the door into the rain, the Glock held low and ready, his eyes scanning for threats. The second robber was climbing into the sliding door of the van, which was already accelerating. The van's driver, a third person Noah hadn't accounted for, gunned the engine, the tires squealing as they fought for traction on the wet pavement, and the van was heading directly toward Noah's truck, toward Maddie. No! Noah roared, bringing the Glock up, his finger moving to the trigger. But he couldn't fire, not with Maddie so close, not with the risk that a bullet could penetrate the van and strike his daughter. The van swerved at the last second, missing the truck by inches, and Noah saw a small face appear in his truck's window. Maddie, awake now, her eyes wide with terror, as she watched her father standing in the rain with a gun. The van fishtailed out of the parking lot and onto the highway, disappearing into the darkness. Seconds later, 3 black SUVs with flashing blue lights roared past the gas station in pursuit, their sirens Doppler shifting as they passed. Noah stood there in the rain, the Glock lowering as his hands began to shake, the adrenaline starting to fade and leave behind a sick, hollow feeling in his gut. He looked at his truck, at Maddie's face pressed against the window, and felt something inside him crack. Freeze! Drop the weapon! Multiple voices shouted simultaneously. Noah turned slowly to find 4 FBI agents in tactical gear surrounding him, their weapons trained on his center mass. Behind them, the blonde clerk, no, the FBI agent, was emerging from the store, her badge now prominently displayed, her gun still in her hand but pointed at the ground. Stand down, she ordered her team. He's a civilian. He helped. He's holding a suspect's weapon, one of the tactical agents responded, not lowering his rifle. Noah looked down at the Glock in his hand as if seeing it for the first time. Slowly, carefully, he crouched and placed it on the ground, then raised his hands above his head. My daughter, he said, his voice rough. She's in the truck. She's 7. She's scared. Please. The blonde agent holstered her weapon and approached Noah, her eyes studying him with an intensity that made him feel like she was reading his entire life story. Your name? Noah Hayes. Military? Army, 3 tours. Afghanistan. Discharged 2019. She nodded as if this confirmed something. I'm Special Agent Lissa Monroe, FBI. You just interfered with an 18-month federal investigation, Mr. Hayes, but you also probably saved my life and kept one of our suspects from getting away, so I'm not sure whether to arrest you or thank you. Noah's laugh was harsh and humorless. Can I check on my daughter first? Agent Monroe glanced at the truck, where Maddie's face was still pressed against the window, then back at Noah. For a moment, something soft passed across her features, something human beneath the federal agent facade. Yeah, she said quietly. Yeah, you can check on your daughter. Noah walked to the truck on legs that felt like they might give out at any moment, opened the door, and pulled Maddie into his arms. She was crying, her small body shaking, and Noah held her tight, whispering the words he always said when she was scared. "You're safe, baby bird. Daddy's got you. You're safe." But even as he said it, even as he stroked her hair and felt her tears soaking through his shirt, Noah knew that something had changed tonight. He'd pulled himself back into a world he'd spent 6 years trying to leave behind. A world of violence and threat assessment and split-second decisions that determined who lived and who died. And the worst part, the part that made his stomach turn, was that it had felt right, natural, like coming home to a house you'd never really left. Agent Monroe approached them, her tactical vest removed now, looking more human but no less serious. "Mr. Hayes, I need you to come to our field office to give a statement. It's not optional." Noah looked at Maddie, then at the agent. "I have to get her home. She has school tomorrow." "I understand. We'll have someone drive you both there. But we need to talk, and it can't wait." Monroe's voice softened slightly. "What you did tonight, you saw things that could compromise an ongoing investigation if they became public. Things that could put people in danger. Do you understand?" Noah understood perfectly. He'd just become a liability, a civilian with information about a federal operation. They needed to know what he knew, what he'd seen, and whether he could be trusted to keep his mouth shut. "I understand," he said quietly. 20 minutes later, Noah and Maddie were in the back of an FBI vehicle, heading toward the field office in Atlanta. Maddie had fallen asleep again, exhausted from fear and tears, her head resting on Noah's lap. Through the rain-streaked window, Noah watched the dark Georgia landscape roll past and wondered how a simple stop for gas had turned into this. The field office was a nondescript building in a business park, the kind of place you could drive past 1,000 times without noticing. Inside, it was all fluorescent lights, industrial carpet, and the peculiar smell of government facilities, coffee, paper, and a faint chemical odor from the cleaning products. Agent Monroe led them to a conference room and arranged for someone to bring blankets and a pillow for Maddie, who was installed on a couch in an adjoining office. Noah watched through the glass door as his daughter curled up under a FBI-issued blanket, clutching her stuffed bunny, and felt a surge of anger at himself for putting her in this situation. "She'll be fine," Monroe said, setting 2 cups of coffee on the conference table. "I've got 2 kids myself. I know it's scary, but kids are more resilient than we think." Noah sat down heavily, accepting the coffee even though he knew it would taste terrible. "What happened back there?" "Really?" Monroe studied him for a long moment, as if deciding how much to reveal. Finally, she sat down across from him and folded her hands on the table. "How much do you know about organized crime structures?" "Not much. I fought insurgents, not mobsters." "Fair enough. Here's the short version. For the past 18 months, my team has been tracking a money laundering operation that we believe is connected to a Mexican cartel. They've been washing drug money through a series of legitimate businesses, car washes, gas stations, restaurants. The Redmond's Stop and Go was one of their fronts." Noah's coffee cup paused halfway to his lips. "So the robbery was supposed to be the final piece of our evidence gathering. Those 2 men you encountered? Not random robbers. They work for the organization. Their job tonight was to collect the laundered cash from the location and transport it to the next point in the chain. We had surveillance on 3 locations simultaneously. When they made their move at Redmond's, we were supposed to follow them back to the distribution hub." "And I screwed it up," Noah said flatly. "Actually, you might have improved it." Monroe leaned back in her chair. "The second suspect, the one who got away, he didn't go where we expected. He's deviating from the pattern. That tells me something's changed in the organization. Someone tipped them off, or they got spooked, or there's a shift in leadership we didn't know about." "The van," Noah said, remembering. "Your people were following it." "They lost it." Monroe's expression darkened. "It went off-grid in a way that suggests sophisticated counter-surveillance. These people have resources, Mr. Hayes, money, technology, and clearly some tactical training." Noah processed this information, his combat-trained mind automatically beginning to analyze the implications. "The second robber, he used military terminology, called me a civilian." Monroe's eyes sharpened. "You caught that?" "Hard not to. We've suspected for a while that the organization has been recruiting former military personnel, men with training and skills who are having trouble transitioning back to civilian life. Men who need money and aren't too particular about where it comes from. She paused, letting that sink in. Men like you, potentially. Noah set his coffee cup down carefully, fighting to keep his voice level. I'm not for sale, Agent Monroe. I didn't say you were, but they don't know that. And that's what gives me an idea. She leaned forward, her eyes intense. What you did tonight at that gas station, the way you moved, the way you assessed the situation, the way you controlled the first suspect, that was professional-grade combat training, special forces level. Rangers, actually, 75th Regiment, but I wasn't Spec Ops. Close enough. Here's the thing, Mr. Hayes. You have exactly the profile they're looking for. Veteran, combat experience, financial difficulties. How do you know about... It's my job to know. You're 3 months behind on rent, you've got medical debt from your wife's final hospitalization, and you're working 2 jobs to make ends meet. You're not doing anything illegal, but you're struggling. The kind of struggling that makes people vulnerable to recruitment. Noah felt heat rising in his face, a mixture of embarrassment and anger. Get to the point. Work with us. Let us use you as bait. We introduce you into the organization, you gather intelligence, and we take down the entire operation from the inside. The words hung in the air between them, and Noah felt a laugh building in his chest, a dark, bitter thing that had nothing to do with humor. You want me to go undercover, into a cartel organization, while raising my 7-year-old daughter alone. I want you to help us stop the people who are flooding your community with drugs, the same drugs that probably killed your wife. Monroe's voice was quiet but hard. And yes, while we're at it, you'd be compensated. Federal contractor rates. Enough to catch up on your bills and then some. Noah stood up abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. No, absolutely not. I'm done with that life. I came home to be a father, not to fight someone else's war. This isn't someone else's war, Mr. Hayes. This is your community, your daughter's school district, the neighborhoods where you buy groceries and get gas and try to build a normal life. Monroe stood as well, matching his intensity. How many more kids are going to lose their parents to overdoses? How many more families are going to be destroyed? You have the skills to help us stop it. I also have a daughter who needs a living father, not a dead hero. Noah moved toward the door. Are we done here? Can I take my daughter home? Monroe sighed and pulled out a business card, sliding it across the table. We're done, for now. But take this. Think about what I said. If you change your mind, call me. Anytime, day or night. Noah pocketed the card without looking at it. I won't change my mind. An hour later, a FBI driver dropped Noah and Maddie off at their apartment, a 2-bedroom unit in a complex that had seen better days, located in a part of town that real estate agents called developing and residents called sketchy. Noah carried Maddie up the stairs, her arms wrapped around his neck, her breath warm against his skin. Their apartment was exactly as they'd left it, clean but threadbare, furnished with thrift store finds and hand-me-downs. The walls were covered with Maddie's drawings and school projects, bright splashes of color that Noah had put up to hide the places where the paint was peeling. In the kitchen, the pile of unpaid bills still sat on the counter where he'd left them. Electric, water, rent, medical debt, student loans from the degree he'd never finished. Noah tucked Maddie into her bed, pulling her favorite purple blanket up to her chin. She stirred, her eyes opening slightly. "Daddy?" she whispered. "Those were bad men, weren't they?" Noah's throat tightened. "Yeah, baby bird. But they're gone now. You're safe. Are you in trouble?" God, she was too perceptive, too aware. "No, sweetheart. Everything's fine. Go back to sleep." "Promise?" "Promise." But as Noah left her room and walked into the kitchen, staring at the pile of bills that represented more money than he had any hope of paying, he wasn't sure he believed his own promise. Agent Monroe's words echoed in his head. One night's work could change everything, could save lives, could make a difference. He pulled out Monroe's business card, studying it in the dim light from the stove's hood. Special Agent Lissa Monroe, Federal Bureau of Investigation. Below that, a phone number and an email address. Noah thought about his wife, Sarah, beautiful and bright, and destroyed by the very drugs that Monroe was trying to stop. He thought about the day he'd found her, blue-lipped and cold on their bathroom floor, while their baby daughter cried in her crib down the hall. He thought about the promise he'd made at her grave, that he would never let that world touch Maddie, that he would keep her safe no matter what. But how could he keep her safe if he couldn't even keep a roof over her head? Noah crumpled the business card and threw it in the trash. Then, after a moment, he pulled it back out, smoothed it flat, and tucked it into his wallet, just in case. Outside, the storm was beginning to clear, the rain tapering off to a gentle patter. In the distance, thunder rumbled, not the violent crack of the earlier storm, but a low, ominous growl that seemed to promise more weather to come. Noah stood at the kitchen window, looking out over the parking lot of his apartment complex, and wondered if he'd really left the war behind or if he'd just been waiting for it to find him again. Somewhere across the city, Agent Lissa Monroe was probably filing reports, debriefing her team, analyzing what had gone wrong and what had gone right during the night's operation. The second suspect was still in the wind. The van had disappeared. The cartel's money laundering operation was still functioning, and a single father with combat training had just walked into the middle of it all. Noah thought about the way it had felt to move again with purpose, to make split-second tactical decisions, to be part of something bigger than himself. He thought about how wrong it was that a part of him had actually enjoyed those few seconds of action. He also thought about the number in his bank account, $127.43, and the bills on the counter that totaled thousands. He thought about Maddie's school fees and her upcoming birthday and the dentist appointment he'd been putting off because he couldn't afford the copay. The business card seemed to burn in his wallet like a live coal. Just one job, he thought, just enough to get caught up. Then I'm out for good. But Noah had been in enough combat to know that nothing was ever just one job. Every mission led to another mission. Every operation opened doors that were hard to close. Once you stepped back into that world, it had a way of claiming you. Still, as he looked at his daughter's door and thought about all the things he wanted to give her, safety, security, opportunities, a future, he couldn't help but wonder if maybe Monroe was right. Maybe this was his chance to make a real difference, to use his skills for something that mattered, to help prevent other children from losing their parents the way Maddie had lost her mother. Or maybe he was just trying to justify doing something reckless because he missed the adrenaline and the purpose and the clear, simple morality of combat, where you knew who the enemy was and what you had to do. Noah didn't know. He was too tired to think clearly, too shaken by the night's events to trust his own judgment. Tomorrow, he decided. Tomorrow he would think about it clearly. Tomorrow he would make the smart decision, the safe decision, the responsible father decision. Tonight, he would just hold his daughter's future in his mind and try not to think about Special Agent Lissa Monroe's phone number burning a hole in his wallet, or the way his hands had moved with such practiced efficiency when violence had suddenly entered his world again. The storm outside had passed, but Noah could feel another one gathering on the horizon, one with his name on it, one that he wasn't sure he could avoid no matter how hard he tried. He checked on Maddie one more time, watching her sleep peacefully in the dim glow of her nightlight, then retreated to his own room. Sleep came hard and brought dreams of Afghan mountains and masked men and a van disappearing into darkness while somewhere his daughter called his name. And in the morning, when the sun rose over Atlanta and life went back to normal, or as normal as it ever got, Noah Hayes would have to decide whether to throw away Agent Monroe's business card or make a phone call that would change everything. But that was a problem for tomorrow's Noah. Tonight's Noah just wanted to forget that for a few terrifying, exhilarating moments, he'd felt more alive than he had in years. Morning came too soon, breaking through the thin curtains of Noah's bedroom with the kind of insistent brightness that made his exhausted eyes ache. He'd managed maybe 3 hours of sleep, his dreams a chaotic mix of gunfire and Maddie's terrified face pressed against the truck window. When his alarm went off at 5:30 a.m., he slapped it silent and lay there for a moment, staring at the water-stained ceiling, trying to convince himself that the previous night had been some kind of fever dream. But the bruises on his knuckles told him otherwise. So did the FBI business card sitting on his nightstand, where he'd placed it after pulling it from his wallet at 3 a.m. during one of his many wakeful moments. Noah hauled himself out of bed and went through the motions of his morning routine. Shower, shave, instant coffee that tasted like burnt rubber. He was pulling on his work shirt, the one with Hayes embroidered over the pocket and grease stains that never quite came out, when he heard Maddie's door open. She appeared in his doorway, her purple blanket wrapped around her shoulders like a cape, her hair sticking up in directions that defied physics. Her eyes were puffy from crying, and she looked at him with an expression that made his heart break. "Did last night really happen?" she asked quietly. Noah knelt down to her level, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Yeah, baby bird, it really happened, but it's over now." "You had a gun." "It wasn't mine. I took it from one of the bad men so he couldn't hurt anyone." "Were you scared?" The question caught him off guard. Noah had spent years in combat zones, had faced down enemy fire and IEDs and situations that would have broken lesser men. But he'd never been as terrified as he was last night when that van had headed toward his truck. Toward her. "Yeah," he admitted, "I was scared, but you know what? Being scared doesn't mean you don't do what needs to be done. It just means you're smart enough to understand the danger." Maddie processed this, then threw her arms around his neck. "I don't want you to do dangerous things anymore." "I know, sweetheart, I know." Noah held her tight, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo, feeling the weight of every promise he'd ever made to her. "How about we get you some breakfast and get you ready for school?" An hour later, after convincing Maddie to eat some oatmeal and helping her pack her backpack, Noah dropped her off at Pine Ridge Elementary. He watched her walk through those doors, her little backpack almost as big as she was, and felt that familiar ache of wanting to protect her from absolutely everything the world might throw at her. His shift at Morton's Auto Repair started at 7, and by the time Noah arrived, his boss, Carl, was already in the office, working through paperwork with a cigarette dangling from his lips, despite the clearly posted no smoking signs. "You look like hell, Hayes," Carl observed, not looking up from his invoices. "Rough night," Noah muttered, grabbing his toolbox from the locker. "Yeah, well, rough night or not, we got 6 cars backed up, and Mrs. Henderson's been calling about her Camry every hour on the hour. Says it's making a noise." "They're always making a noise," Noah replied, but he headed out to the garage bay anyway, grateful for the mindless routine of work. Brake jobs and oil changes didn't require him to think about FBI agents or cartel operations, or the way his hands had moved with such practiced efficiency when violence had erupted. He was 3 hours into disassembling Mrs. Henderson's Camry. The noise was a worn serpentine belt, easily fixed, when his phone buzzed in his pocket. Noah ignored it. It buzzed again. And again. With a sigh, he wiped his hands on a shop rag and pulled out his phone. 3 missed calls from a number he didn't recognize and a text message that made his stomach drop. "Mr. Hayes, this is Agent Monroe. We need to talk. It's urgent. The situation has developed overnight. Please call me as soon as possible." Noah stared at the message for a long moment. The smart thing would be to delete it, block the number, and go back to his life of oil changes and overdue bills. The smart thing would be to stay as far away from federal investigations as possible. He was still telling himself this when he found himself walking out to the parking lot and dialing Monroe's number. She answered on the first ring. "Mr. Hayes, thank you for calling back." "I haven't decided anything," Noah said immediately. "I just wanted to know what happened. Can you come to the field office? This isn't a conversation for the phone." "I'm at work." "This is more important than work, Mr. Hayes. Trust me." There was something in Monroe's voice, a tension, an urgency, that made Noah's combat instincts sit up and pay attention. "Give me an hour," he said, and hung up before she could respond. Carl wasn't happy about Noah leaving in the middle of a shift, but a mumbled excuse about a family emergency bought him a few hours. The drive to the FBI field office felt longer in daylight, the building somehow more intimidating when he could actually see it clearly. Noah parked his beat-up truck between 2 sleek government sedans and felt acutely aware of how out of place he was. Agent Monroe met him in the lobby, and Noah was struck by how different she looked from the gas station clerk he'd first encountered. Today, she was in a dark suit, her blonde hair down, and there were shadows under her eyes that suggested she'd gotten even less sleep than he had. "Follow me," she said without preamble, leading him through a maze of corridors to the same conference room from the previous night. But this time the room wasn't empty. 4 other people sat around the table, all wearing similar dark suits, all studying Noah with the kind of analytical intensity that made him feel like a specimen under a microscope. "Mr. Hayes, this is my team," Monroe began, gesturing around the table. "Special Agent Marcus Chen, our tech specialist, Special Agent Jennifer Parks, who handles financial crimes, Special Agent Raymond Torres, Tactical Operations, and this is Assistant Director Catherine Walsh, who's overseeing the entire investigation. Walsh was a woman in her 50s with steel gray hair and eyes that looked like they'd seen everything twice. She stood up and extended her hand. Mr. Hayes, Agent Monroe has told me quite a bit about you. Please, sit down. Noah shook her hand. Her grip was firm and professional, and took a seat, feeling increasingly like he'd walked into something much bigger than he'd anticipated. What's this about? Last night's operation was supposed to be routine surveillance, Walsh began, folding her hands on the table. We had 3 teams positioned at 3 different money laundering locations. When the collection crew showed up, we were going to follow them back to their distribution hub. Simple, clean, no direct confrontation. Then I showed up and everything went sideways, Noah said flatly. Actually, no. It was Agent Chen who spoke, pushing his glasses up his nose and sliding a tablet across the table toward Noah. What you did exposed something we didn't know was happening. Look at this. The tablet showed security footage from multiple angles, the gas station where Noah had intervened, but also 2 other locations. Noah watched as, at almost exactly the same time, collection crews arrived at all 3 sites. But unlike the attempted robbery at Redmond's Stop and Go, the other 2 locations went smoothly. Money changed hands, vans drove away, FBI surveillance teams followed at a distance. This is where it gets interesting, Chen continued, tapping the screen to fast forward. All 3 vans were supposed to converge at a warehouse on the east side of the city, but look what happens. Noah watched as 2 vans arrived at the warehouse as expected, but the 3rd van, the one from Redmond's, the one that had gotten away, never showed up. Instead, according to the GPS tracking data that Chen pulled up, it had gone to a completely different location. They split off, Noah observed. Why? That's the million-dollar question, Monroe said, leaning forward. Either they were spooked by what happened at Redmond's, or they were always planning to split off, Agent Torres interrupted. His voice had the gravelly quality of someone who'd spent too many years shouting orders over gunfire. Someone's running a side operation, skimming from the main cartel. Which means we have a splinter faction, Walsh said. An internal conflict within a criminal organization is an opportunity, Noah finished. He'd seen it in Afghanistan, insurgent groups fracturing, fighting among themselves, creating openings for intelligence operations. You want to exploit the split. Walsh smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. You're as smart as Agent Monroe said you were. Yes, Mr. Hayes, we want to exploit it. But to do that, we need someone on the inside, someone they'll trust, someone with exactly your background and profile. Noah stood up abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. I told Agent Monroe last night, I'm not interested. I have a daughter to raise. And we have a situation that's escalating rapidly, Walsh replied, her voice hardening. Mr. Hayes, let me be blunt. That van that drove past your truck last night? The one that came within inches of your daughter? We found it this morning, burned out in an industrial park. The 2 men who were in it were executed, single gunshot to the back of the head, professional style. Noah felt his blood run cold. What are you saying? I'm saying the organization doesn't tolerate failure. I'm saying they're cleaning house. And I'm saying that sooner or later, they're going to wonder who interfered with their collection at Redmond's Stop and Go. They're going to see the security footage. We can't control every camera in that area. They're going to see a tall white male, military-bearing, combat training, taking down one of their crew. They're going to come looking for you, Agent Parks added quietly. Not today, maybe not this week, but eventually. Noah's mind was racing, calculating angles and possibilities. So what you're really saying is, I don't have a choice. Either I work with you, or I'm a target anyway. We can offer you protection, Monroe said. Witness protection, relocation, new identities for both you and your daughter. But that means giving up everything, your home, your job, your entire life. Starting over in some town where nobody knows you. Or, Walsh continued, you help us close this case quickly. You go in, you gather intelligence, we bring down the entire organization. 2 weeks, maybe 3 at most. Then you and your daughter can go back to your normal lives, but with enough federal contractor money to actually build a future. College fund, savings, security. Noah walked to the window, looking out over the Atlanta skyline. Somewhere out there, Maddie was sitting in her second-grade classroom, probably worrying about him, probably replaying the events of last night in her 7-year-old mind. He'd promised to keep her safe. But what did safety even mean anymore? What exactly would I have to do? He heard himself ask. The next 2 hours were a crash course in undercover operations. Agent Chen showed him the intelligence they'd gathered over 18 months. Organizational charts, financial records, surveillance photos. The cartel's money laundering network was extensive, reaching throughout Atlanta and into 3 neighboring states. But the key operation, the hub that controlled everything, was a luxury car garage on the north side of the city. It's called Elite European Motors, Monroe explained, pulling up photos on the conference room screen. On the surface, it's a legitimate business catering to wealthy clients. They repair and customize high-end vehicles, Porsches, BMWs, Mercedes, but it's also a front. They use the business to wash drug money, inflate invoices, create paper trails for illegal income. And you think they're recruiting former military? Noah asked, studying the photos. The garage looked upscale, professional, not at all like what he'd imagined a cartel front would look like. We know they are, Torres said. We've identified at least 3 employees with military backgrounds. The owner, a man named Vincent Kozlov, specifically targets veterans. He offers good pay, asks few questions, and provides opportunities for people who are struggling to transition back to civilian life. People like me, Noah said quietly. Exactly like you. Single father, combat veteran, financial problems, working below his skill level. Monroe met his eyes. You're the perfect candidate, Mr. Hayes, and that's what makes you valuable to us. How would I even get in? I can't just walk up and ask for a job working for a cartel. You don't have to, Agent Park said, opening a folder and sliding it across the table. We've already laid the groundwork. 3 days ago, we placed an anonymous tip with one of Kozlov's recruiters. Information about a veteran working at Morton's Auto Repair who has the skills they're looking for and the financial desperation that makes him vulnerable. They've been watching you, Mr. Hayes. They just don't know it yet. Noah felt a chill run down his spine. You set me up. Before I even walked into that gas station, you were setting me up. We were creating an opportunity, Walsh corrected. What happened at Redmond's was unexpected, but it actually strengthens your profile. You demonstrated combat skills, tactical thinking, and a willingness to act under pressure. You're exactly what they're looking for. And what happens when they find out I'm FBI? They won't. As far as anyone outside this room is concerned, you're just Noah Hayes, struggling veteran, single dad, in over his head financially. We've created a cover identity that's 90% truth, the best kind. The only lie is what happens next. Monroe pulled out a phone, setting it on the table. This is your lifeline. It looks like a regular smartphone, but it has encrypted communication capabilities. You'll check in with me twice a day, morning and night. If you're in immediate danger, there's a panic button on the side. Press it 3 times fast, and we'll have tactical teams on your location within minutes. What about Maddie? She stays in her regular routine, Walsh said. School, home, normal life. We'll have surveillance on your apartment 24/7, but it'll be discreet. She won't know. And if something goes wrong, if they figure out what I'm doing? Nobody answered immediately, and that silence told Noah everything he needed to know. If his cover was blown, he was on his own until the cavalry arrived. And in the world of organized crime, a lot could happen in the minutes it took for FBI tactical teams to respond. I need to think about it, Noah said finally. You have until tomorrow morning, Walsh replied. That's when Kozlov's recruiter is supposed to make contact. If you're not ready to commit by then, we'll have to go with Plan B. What's Plan B? Witness protection for you and your daughter, starting immediately. New city, new names, new life. No delay, no second chances. Walsh stood up, signaling the meeting was over. I know this is a lot to process, Mr. Hayes, but I need you to understand this isn't just about catching bad guys. This organization has distributed enough fentanyl to kill thousands of people. They've destroyed families, ruined communities, and they're not stopping. You have a chance to help us end it. Noah left the field office in a daze, climbing into his truck and sitting there for 10 minutes before he even started the engine. His hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the weight of the decision pressing down on him. Every choice led to danger. Stay out of it. and they might come after him anyway. Run, and he'd spend the rest of his life looking over his shoulder. Go in, and he might not come back out. He drove back to Morton's Auto Repair, finished Mrs. Henderson's Camry, and worked through the rest of his shift on autopilot. Carl noticed something was off and asked if everything was okay, but Noah just mumbled something about family stress and kept working. The familiar rhythm of mechanical work usually calmed his mind, but today it did nothing to quiet the storm of thoughts racing through his head. At 3:15 p.m., Noah picked up Maddie from school. She climbed into the truck with her backpack and a drawing she'd made in art class, a picture of their apartment building with the two of them standing in front holding hands under a rainbow. "Look what I made, Daddy," she said, her voice bright with the resilience of childhood. Last night's terror had already started to fade for her, processed and filed away in whatever mental compartment 7-year-olds used to deal with trauma. "It's beautiful, baby bird," Noah said, and meant it. "We'll put it on the fridge when we get home." Mrs. Patterson said we're doing a unit on families next week. We have to bring in photos and talk about our family history. Maddie paused, then added quietly, "I'm going to talk about Mommy. Is that okay?" Noah's throat tightened. "Of course it's okay. Mommy would love that." They stopped for groceries on the way home, the cheap store brand stuff that Noah could afford, stretching every dollar as far as it would go. Maddie helped him load the bags into the truck, chattering about her day, about her friend Emma, who'd gotten in trouble for talking during reading time, about the science project they were starting next week. Normal life. This was normal life. The life Noah had fought to build after coming home from war, after losing Sarah, after deciding that he was done with violence and danger and everything that came with that world. But as he carried groceries up the stairs to their apartment, he couldn't shake Agent Walsh's words. This organization has destroyed families, ruined communities. How many more kids were going to lose parents to overdoses? How many more families were going to be shattered the way his had been? That night, after dinner, spaghetti with sauce from a jar, garlic bread from the day-old rack, Noah helped Maddie with her homework at the kitchen table. Simple addition problems, reading comprehension questions about a story about a dog who saved his family from a fire. When she struggled with a math problem, Noah walked her through it patiently, breaking it down into steps she could understand. This was what mattered. This quiet evening at the kitchen table, helping his daughter learn, building a life that was safe and stable and normal. But the unpaid bills still sat on the counter, a constant reminder that safe and stable required money they didn't have. And somewhere in the city, a criminal organization was moving drugs and destroying lives, recruiting vulnerable veterans and exploiting their skills for profit. After tucking Maddie into bed, 2 stories tonight, because she asked nicely and because Noah couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to change, he sat in the kitchen with a beer he couldn't really afford and Agent Monroe's phone sitting on the table in front of him. He could just throw it away. Tell them no. Take his chances with witness protection or with hoping the cartel never connected him to the gas station incident, or he could make the call. Step back into the world he'd sworn he was done with, risk everything for the chance to make a real difference. Noah thought about Sarah, about the way addiction had slowly stolen her from him until the woman he'd married had become a stranger. He thought about the day he'd found her body, about the needle still in her arm, about the fact that somewhere out there, someone had sold her the drugs that killed her. Someone who didn't care that she was a wife, a mother, a human being with people who loved her. Someone like the people Monroe was trying to stop. His phone, his regular phone, not the FBI one, buzzed with an incoming text. Unknown number. Noah's heart rate kicked up as he opened it. "Mr. Hayes, my name is Daniel Reeves. I represent a business opportunity that might interest you. Elite European Motors is looking for experienced mechanics with your particular skill set. Would you be available to meet tomorrow morning, 9 a.m.? The pay is significantly better than your current position. Please reply to confirm." Noah stared at the message for a long moment. This was it. The moment Walsh had warned him about. The recruiter making contact. He had until morning to decide, but the decision was essentially being made right now. He could ignore the text, block the number, call Monroe and tell her to arrange witness protection, or he could respond, set up the meeting, walk through the door that was opening in front of him. Noah stood up and walked to Maddie's room, opening her door quietly. She was asleep, her stuffed bunny tucked under one arm, her face peaceful in the glow of her nightlight. He stood there for a long time, watching her breathe, thinking about all the promises he'd made to her and to himself. Then he went back to the kitchen, picked up his regular phone, and typed out a response. 9 a.m. works. I'll be there. He hit send before he could change his mind, then immediately picked up the FBI phone and called Monroe. She answered on the second ring. Hayes? I'm in, Noah said simply. But we need to establish ground rules. I'm not doing this for the money, and I'm not doing it because you backed me into a corner. I'm doing it because my daughter deserves to grow up in a world where people like this don't exist. Understood. What do you need from us? Protection for Maddie. Real protection, not just surveillance. If this goes sideways, I need to know she'll be safe. You have my word. What else? If I tell you to pull me out, you pull me out. No questions, no hesitation. I'm not expendable, Agent Monroe. I'm a father first, an asset second. There was a pause, then Monroe said quietly, Fair enough. The meet is at 9. Yeah. Elite European Motors. We'll have eyes on the location. I'll brief you on what to expect and what to look for. Can you come in early tomorrow, say 7? Noah thought about his shift at Morton's, about Carl's face when he'd have to call in again. He'd probably lose the job, but if this worked, he wouldn't need it. And if it didn't work, he'd probably be dead or in witness protection, so the job wouldn't matter anyway. I'll be there at 7, he confirmed. Hayes? Monroe's voice softened slightly. For what it's worth, I think you're doing the right thing. Yeah, well, ask me again in a week, if I'm still alive to answer. He hung up and sat there in the dark kitchen, finishing his beer, listening to the sounds of the apartment building settling around him, muffled television from next door, footsteps overhead, the distant wail of a siren somewhere in the city. Noah had made his decision. Tomorrow morning, he would walk into Elite European Motors and begin the process of infiltrating a criminal organization. He would lie, manipulate, and pretend to be someone he wasn't. He would use his military training not to protect his country, but to gather intelligence for an FBI operation. And if he succeeded, maybe he could help prevent other families from being destroyed the way his had been. Maybe he could make Sarah's death mean something. Maybe he could build a future for Maddie that didn't involve unpaid bills and constant financial stress. Or maybe he would get himself killed, leaving his daughter an orphan. But sitting in his dark kitchen with an empty beer bottle and a pile of bills he couldn't pay, Noah realized that he'd already made his choice the moment that Van had driven past his truck at the gas station. The moment he'd seen Maddie's terrified face in the window. The moment he'd remembered what it felt like to have purpose beyond just surviving day to day. He was going back to war. But this time, the battlefield was his own city. The enemy wore business suits instead of tactical gear, and the stakes were his daughter's future. Noah cleaned up the kitchen, checked the locks on the door twice, a habit from his combat days that he'd never quite broken, and went to bed. Sleep came easier than he'd expected, probably because his body was too exhausted to care what his mind was worried about. And in the morning, when the alarm went off at 5:30 a.m., Noah Hayes got up and began preparing for the most dangerous mission of his life. Not in some foreign country, but in his own backyard, fighting an enemy that destroyed lives with products instead of bullets. He showered, dressed in his best jeans and a clean button-down shirt, and stood in front of the bathroom mirror practicing the persona he would need to project, desperate but competent, skilled but morally flexible, in need of money, and not too particular about where it came from. A man exactly like the one he could have become if he'd made different choices after coming home from Afghanistan. The thought was sobering. The line between who he was and who he was pretending to be wasn't as thick as he'd like to believe. Given enough pressure, enough desperation, enough erosion of hope, any man could become someone he didn't recognize. Noah kissed Maddie goodbye while she was still sleeping, leaving a note on her pillow that he'd pick her up from school like always, and headed out into the early morning darkness. The FBI field office was mostly empty at this hour, but Monroe was there, along with Agent Chen, both of them looking like they'd been up all night. Okay, Hayes, Monroe said, setting a cup of coffee in front of him that actually smelled decent. Let's make sure you're ready for this. The briefing took 90 minutes, and by the end of it, Noah's head was swimming with details, cover story elements, and operational protocols that would have made his Army training seem simple by comparison. Agent Chen had walked him through the encrypted phone's features 3 times, making him practice the panic button sequence until he could do it without thinking. Monroe had drilled him on the cover story until Noah could recite his fabricated financial troubles and moral flexibility without hesitation. "Remember," Monroe said, leaning against the conference table with her arms crossed, "Vincent Kozlov is smart. He's been running this operation for 5 years without getting caught because he's careful and he's paranoid. He'll test you, push you, look for any sign that you're not who you claim to be." "What kind of tests?" Noah asked, draining the last of his coffee. "Could be anything. Background check, social media deep dive, showing up at your apartment unannounced. He might even stage something to see how you react under pressure." Monroe pulled up a photo on the tablet, sliding it across to Noah. "This is Kozlov." The man in the photo was in his late 40s, with silver hair styled impeccably, wearing an expensive suit that probably cost more than Noah made in 3 months. He had the kind of face that could have belonged to a corporate executive or a college professor. Intelligent, refined, utterly unremarkable. Except for his eyes. Even in a photograph, there was something cold in those eyes, something that calculated value and threat with equal precision. Russian mob? Noah guessed. His father was, back in Moscow. Vincent came to the U.S. when he was 12, got educated at Georgia Tech, started the car garage as a legitimate business. But the family connections were always there, and when the cartels needed someone to wash their money through the Southeast, Kozlov was perfect. American citizen, clean record, respectable businessman. Agent Chen pulled up more files. He's recruited 7 veterans that we know of over the past 2 years. 4 are still working for him. The other 3 are dead. Noah's head snapped up. Dead how? 2 overdoses, 1 car accident, all ruled accidental or natural causes, but the timing was suspicious. Each one had been with the organization for 6 to 8 months, right around the time they'd have accumulated enough knowledge to be dangerous if they decided to talk. So he cycles through employees, uses them up, and throws them away. Noah felt a familiar anger building in his chest, the same rage he'd felt when he learned about contractors overseas who'd exploited local populations for profit. "Which is why we need to move fast," Monroe said. "Get in, gather evidence, get out. 2 weeks maximum. We're not trying to build a RICO case here. We just need enough to justify raids on all their operations simultaneously. Financial records, shipment schedules, connections to the cartel. Kozlov keeps most of the sensitive information on a computer in his office. If you can get access to that, we can shut this whole thing down. And if I can't get access? If they keep me doing grunt work in the garage? Then you document everything you can and we find another way. But Hayes," Monroe's expression grew serious. "Do not try to be a hero. Do not take unnecessary risks. You're an intelligence asset, not an action hero. Observe, record, report. That's it." Noah nodded, but part of him wondered if it would really be that simple. Combat had taught him that plans rarely survived contact with the enemy, and something told him this operation would be no different. At 8:45 a.m., Noah pulled his truck into the parking lot of Elite European Motors. The facility was impressive, a modern building with floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing at least a dozen high-end vehicles in various states of repair or customization. A Porsche 911 sat on a lift, its engine exposed like a mechanical heart. A Mercedes G-Wagon gleamed under the showroom lights, looking like it had just rolled off the factory floor. Everything about the place screamed money and professionalism. Nothing about it suggested criminal enterprise. Noah checked his appearance in the rearview mirror one last time, then climbed out of his truck, acutely aware of how out of place his beat-up Ford looked among the luxury vehicles. The encrypted phone sat in his pocket, a small weight that felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. The front door chimed when he entered, and a receptionist looked up from her computer with a bright professional smile. She was young, maybe 25, with dark hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail and the kind of polished appearance that suggested this was more than just a garage job to her. "Good morning," she said. "Can I help you?" "Noah Hayes, I have a 9 o'clock appointment with Daniel Reeves." "Of course, Mr. Hayes, please have a seat. Mr. Reeves will be with you shortly. Can I get you some coffee? Water?" "Coffee would be great, thanks." Noah sat in one of the leather chairs in the waiting area, trying not to look like he was cataloging everything he saw. The magazines on the coffee table were all high-end automotive publications. The artwork on the walls featured vintage racing posters and photographs of exotic cars. Through the windows into the garage bays, he could see at least 6 mechanics working, all wearing clean uniforms, all moving with the efficiency of people who knew exactly what they were doing. The receptionist returned with coffee in a real ceramic mug, not a disposable cup. "Mr. Reeves will be right out. He's just finishing up a call." Noah sipped the coffee. It was excellent, far better than anything he'd had in months, and waited. His military training had taught him patience, the ability to sit still and quiet, while his mind stayed alert and processing. He noted the security cameras in the corners, the keypad entry system on the door leading to the back offices, the way the receptionist's computer screen was angled so nobody in the waiting area could see it. Professional. Careful. Controlled. After precisely 3 minutes, a door opened and a man emerged. He was in his 30s, tall and lean, wearing khakis and a polo shirt with the Elite European Motors logo. His handshake was firm, his smile friendly, but his eyes did a quick, assessing scan of Noah that felt almost military in its efficiency. "Mr. Hayes, I'm Daniel Reeves. Thanks for coming in on short notice." His accent was pure Georgia, the kind that came from growing up in Atlanta's suburbs. "Why don't we talk in my office?" Noah followed him through the keypad door. Reeves used his body to shield the code. As he entered it, Noah noticed, and down a hallway lined with framed photographs of luxury vehicles and satisfied customers. Reeves's office was small but neat, with a desk, 2 chairs, and a window overlooking the main garage floor. "So," Reeves said, settling into his chair and opening a folder on his desk, "you're currently working at Morton's Auto Repair. How long have you been there?" 8 months, Noah replied, sticking to the cover story. "It's steady work, but the pay's not great, and there's no real room for advancement." "And before that?" "Army. I did 3 tours in Afghanistan with the 75th Ranger Regiment. Got out in 2019, and I've been trying to figure out the civilian thing ever since." Reeves nodded sympathetically. "Tough transition. I hear that a lot from guys with your background. The structure of military life, the sense of purpose, it's hard to find that in the regular world." "Yeah," Noah said, allowing some genuine frustration to seep into his voice. "It wasn't hard to access those feelings. They'd been real enough over the past few years. I thought I'd come home and everything would just click into place, you know? Get a job, raise my daughter, have a normal life. But normal doesn't pay the bills." "You have a daughter?" 7 years old, Maddie. She's the reason I'm here, honestly. I need to be able to provide for her, and flipping burgers or changing oil at Morton's isn't cutting it." Reeves pulled out a sheet of paper from the folder, studying it. Noah recognized it as a background check. Nothing classified, just the standard stuff any employer might pull. Credit report, work history, military service record, all of it legitimate, all of it painting the picture of a man struggling financially but with skills and experience that made him valuable. "Your service record is impressive," Reeves observed. "Combat decorations, expert marksman qualification, honorable discharge. But there's a gap here after you got out. 2 years where you weren't working at all?" This was the tricky part, the part where Noah had to sell the personal tragedy without overdoing it. "My wife died. Drug overdose. I spent those 2 years trying to keep it together for Maddie, and failing pretty badly. By the time I got my head straight, I was broke and behind on everything." "I'm sorry for your loss," Reeves said, and he actually sounded like he meant it. "That must have been incredibly difficult." "It was. It is." Noah met Reeves' eyes directly. "Look, I'm not going to pretend I'm some kind of saint. I need money, I need it badly, and I'm willing to work hard for it. If Elite European Motors can offer me more than Morton's, I'm interested. If the work comes with some moral ambiguity, I can live with that." There it was. The opening, the signal that Noah was willing to compromise his ethics for financial security. It felt dirty saying it, even as an act, but Monroe had been clear that Kozlov's organization didn't recruit Boy Scouts. Reeves leaned back in his chair, studying Noah with renewed interest. "What makes you think there's any moral ambiguity involved? We repair luxury cars. It's legitimate work." "Come on," Noah said, allowing a slight smile. "You don't text a guy at 9 at night offering significantly better pay without reason. And you don't specifically target veterans with financial problems because you just really love our service to the country. Whatever this is, it's more than oil changes and brake jobs. For a long moment, Reeves said nothing. Then he closed the folder and stood up. Wait here. I need to talk to my boss. He left Noah alone in the office, and Noah used the opportunity to glance around without appearing too obvious about it. The window overlooked the garage floor, where he could now see that several of the vehicles being worked on had out-of-state plates. One bay had a BMW with its interior completely torn out, the seats and door panels stacked against the wall. Another had a Range Rover with its gas tank removed, sitting on a rolling cart. Hiding places. They were modifying vehicles to create hidden compartments for transporting drugs or money. Noah had seen similar setups in Afghanistan, where insurgents would modify vehicles to smuggle weapons and explosives. The door opened and Reeves returned, but he wasn't alone. The man who followed him into the office was Vincent Kozlov, looking exactly like his photograph, but somehow more imposing in person. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost 5 figures, and he moved with the confidence of someone who owned every room he entered. "Mr. Hayes," Kozlov said, his accent carrying just a hint of his Russian origins. "Daniel tells me you are interested in working for us. I wanted to meet you personally before we proceed." Noah stood and shook Kozlov's hand, noting the firm grip and the way Kozlov's eyes studied him with an intensity that felt like being X-rayed. "I appreciate the opportunity, Mr. Kozlov. Please sit. Let's talk frankly, shall we?" Kozlov took Reeves's chair while Reeves stood by the door, arms crossed. "You're a ranger. You've seen combat. You understand operational security and the importance of discretion. These are valuable qualities in an employee." "They are," Noah agreed carefully. "You also understand that in certain situations, traditional morality becomes complicated. In war, you do what's necessary to complete the mission and protect your team, yes?" "Yes." "I run a similar operation here. We do what's necessary. We protect our team, and we compensate our people very well for their loyalty and discretion." Kozlov leaned forward slightly. "The question is whether you're the kind of man who can compartmentalize. Can you do a job that might conflict with traditional legal boundaries, go home to your daughter, and sleep at night?" This was the moment, the final test before they either brought him in or sent him away. Noah thought about Sarah, about the drugs that killed her, about every life destroyed by the products this organization moved. And he channeled all of that into his response. "Mr. Kozlov, I watched friends die in Afghanistan protecting poppy fields because that's what the mission required. I've done things I'm not proud of because my commanding officer told me it was necessary for the greater good. I came home to find my wife dead from drugs I couldn't afford to help her beat, and now I'm raising a little girl on wages that won't even cover rent." Noah's voice was hard now, controlled anger giving his words weight. "Can I compartmentalize? I've been compartmentalizing my whole adult life. The only question is whether you're offering me enough money to make it worth my while." Kozlov studied him for another long moment, then smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "I like you, Mr. Hayes. You're honest about your motivations. Too many people try to pretend they're something they're not." He stood up, buttoning his suit jacket. "We'll start you at $75,000 annually, plus performance bonuses, health insurance, dental, and a benefits package that I think you'll find very attractive. You'll work in our modification department initially, helping with vehicle customization. The hours can be irregular, but the work is straightforward." $75,000. It was more money than Noah had made in the past 3 years combined. For a moment, he understood exactly why veterans got pulled into this. When you were drowning in debt and someone threw you a rope, you didn't ask too many questions about where it came from. "When do I start?" Noah asked. "Tomorrow, 8 a.m. Daniel will handle your onboarding paperwork." Kozlov moved toward the door, then paused. "One more thing, Mr. Hayes. We're very careful about who we bring into our organization. In the next few days, you may notice some of my people, let's say, verifying your story. Don't be alarmed. It's standard procedure. As long as everything you've told us is true, you'll have nothing to worry about." After Kozlov left, Reeves spent another 30 minutes walking Noah through employment paperwork that all looked surprisingly legitimate. W-4 forms, direct deposit information, employee handbook, everything a normal job would require. The cognitive dissonance was jarring. Noah left Elite European Motors at 10:30 a.m. with a start date for the next morning and a head full of information that he needed to relay to Monroe immediately. He drove 3 blocks, pulled into a shopping center parking lot, and called her on the encrypted phone. "I'm in," he said when she answered. "First day is tomorrow at 8. "How did it go?" "Kozlov interviewed me personally. He's careful, professional, and he flat out told me they're going to verify my background. We need to make sure everything holds up." "It will. What else did you see?" Noah described the vehicle modifications he'd observed, the security protocols, the layout of the facility. Monroe listened without interrupting, and he could hear her typing notes on the other end. "Good work," she said when he finished. "That confirms what we suspected about the vehicle transport operation. Once you're inside and working, your priority is documenting everything. Take mental notes, memorize details, but don't write anything down and don't take photos unless you're absolutely certain you won't be caught." "What about Kozlov's computer? You said that's the priority." "It is, but don't push for access too soon. You need to establish trust first, become part of the operation. Give it at least a week before you even think about trying to get into his office." A week. 7 days of pretending to be someone he wasn't, of working alongside criminals, of lying to Maddie about where he was and what he was doing. Noah closed his eyes and leaned his head back against the truck's seat. "Hayes, you okay?" "Yeah," he said, though he wasn't sure it was true. "Yeah, I'm fine. I need to go. I have to quit my job at Morton's and pick up Maddie from school." "Remember the check-in protocol, morning and night every day. If you miss a check-in, we assume you're compromised and we come in fast." "Understood." Noah hung up and sat in his truck for a few more minutes, watching normal people go about their normal lives. Grocery shopping, running errands, heading to lunch meetings. None of them knew that just a few miles away, a criminal organization was operating in plain sight, destroying lives with products hidden in luxury vehicles. The conversation with Carl at Morton's Auto Repair was brief and unpleasant. Noah gave a vague excuse about a family situation requiring him to take a better-paying job immediately, and Carl's disappointment was obvious but tempered by understanding. Good mechanics were hard to find, but men with families to support needed to do what they needed to do. When Noah picked up Maddie from school that afternoon, she bounded out of the building with her backpack bouncing and a huge smile on her face. Whatever fear she'd felt from the gas station incident had faded into the resilience of childhood, replaced by excitement about a field trip her class was planning. "Daddy, we're going to the aquarium next month. Can I get a permission slip signed? Mrs. Patterson says we're going to see sharks and jellyfish, and maybe even a whale shark, which isn't actually a shark at all, but it's called that because—" "Slow down, baby bird," Noah laughed, helping her into the truck. "Yes, I'll sign the permission slip. When do you need it?" "Next week. And it costs $20 for the trip and lunch." Her enthusiasm dimmed slightly. "Is that too much?" $20. 2 weeks ago, it would have been a stretch. Now, with the job at Elite European Motors, it was nothing. The irony wasn't lost on Noah. He could suddenly afford to give his daughter the life she deserved because he was working for the same kind of organization that had killed her mother. "It's fine, sweetheart. We'll make it work." That evening, after dinner and homework and the bedtime routine, Noah sat in his kitchen with a beer and tried to process everything that had happened. In less than 24 hours, he'd gone from working-class mechanic to federal informant embedded in a criminal organization. He'd lied to a dangerous man with cold eyes and gotten away with it. He'd crossed a line that he wasn't sure he could uncross. The encrypted phone buzzed with a message from Monroe. "First day tomorrow. Remember, observe, document, report. Don't take chances. Your daughter needs you alive." Noah typed back a simple acknowledgement, then opened his regular phone and looked at his photo gallery. Pictures of Maddie dominated the collection. First day of school, birthday parties, random moments of her laughing or playing or just being a kid. And scattered among them, older photos of Sarah from before the addiction took hold, young and beautiful and full of life, with no idea what was waiting for her in the years ahead. "I'm doing this for both of you," Noah whispered to the empty kitchen. "I'm doing this so other families don't go through what we did." He hoped it was true. He hoped he wasn't just rationalizing a bad decision, telling himself a noble story to justify walking back into danger. But either way, tomorrow morning he would show up at Elite European Motors and begin his new job as a criminal's employee. The thought should have terrified him. Instead, it felt oddly familiar, like returning to a war zone after too much time in safe areas. His body recognized the approaching danger and was preparing for it with a mixture of adrenaline and focus that he'd almost forgotten existed. Noah finished his beer, checked the locks, looked in on Maddie one last time, and tried to sleep. His dreams were fractured and anxious. Images of Kozlov's cold eyes, modified vehicles full of drugs, Maddie's face in the truck window, Sarah's lifeless body on the bathroom floor. He woke up multiple times, checking his phone for the time, counting down the hours until he had to report to his new job. At 7:45 a.m. the next morning, Noah pulled into the Elite European Motors parking lot dressed in the work clothes they'd provided. Dark blue coveralls with his name embroidered over the pocket, steel-toed boots, a company cap. He looked like a legitimate employee of a legitimate business. The perfect disguise. Daniel Reeves met him at the entrance with a tablet and a friendly smile. "Ready for your first day?" "As ready as I'll ever be." The onboarding process was thorough and professional. Reeves walked him through the facility, introducing him to other employees, most of whom gave him the kind of assessing looks that suggested they'd been through similar vetting processes. The garage was divided into several sections: the main repair bays where legitimate customer work was performed, a customization area where the modifications happened, and a lock section at the back that Reeves didn't show him. "That's storage and administrative," Reeves explained when Noah's eyes lingered on the locked doors. "You'll get access once you've been here a while, and Mr. Kozlov is satisfied with your work." Noah's supervisor was a man named Marcus Webb, a former Marine with tattoos covering both arms and a no-nonsense attitude that reminded Noah of his drill sergeants. Webb was in his early 40s, built like someone who still worked out religiously, and he made it clear from the start that he didn't tolerate laziness or stupidity. "Your job is simple," Webb explained, leading Noah to a bay where a Cadillac Escalade sat with its entire interior removed. "We modify vehicles for clients who need specialized storage capabilities. You'll help with fabrication, installation, and testing. The work needs to be invisible. Anyone looking at these vehicles shouldn't be able to tell they've been modified. That means attention to detail and quality craftsmanship." "Questions?" "What are we storing?" Noah asked, playing the role of someone who wanted to know exactly what he was getting into. Webb's smile was thin. "Nothing you need to worry about. Could be valuables, could be documents, could be whatever the client needs stored discreetly. We don't ask questions, we just do excellent work. Understood?" "Understood." The next several hours were spent learning the modification process. They were creating false panels in door interiors, hollow spaces under seats, compartments behind dashboard components, all of it expertly done with materials that matched the original manufacturer specifications. Noah worked alongside two other mechanics, both of whom were taciturn and focused on their jobs. Nobody made small talk. Nobody asked personal questions. It was clear that everyone here understood the value of discretion. During his lunch break, taken in a small employee lounge with vending machines and cheap coffee, Noah found himself alone with one of the other mechanics, a younger guy named Travis, who couldn't have been more than 25. Travis had the kind of nervous energy that suggested either drug use or just natural anxiety, and he kept glancing at the door as if expecting someone to walk in. "First day?" Travis asked, pulling a sandwich from a brown paper bag. "Yeah. You been here long?" "6 months. It's good work if you can keep your head down and your mouth shut." Travis lowered his voice. "Advice from someone who's been here a minute. Don't ask questions you don't want answered. Do your job, take your paycheck, and don't think too hard about where the money comes from." "That sounds like experience talking." "Yeah, well, I made the mistake of getting curious about what was in one of the compartments we built. Mr. Kozlov made it very clear that curiosity isn't a valued trait here." Travis touched his left arm unconsciously, and Noah noticed what looked like a burn scar peeking out from under his sleeve. Before Noah could respond, Webb appeared in the doorway. "Hayes, break's over. We've got another vehicle coming in that needs modifications by tomorrow." The afternoon passed in focused work. Noah's military training and mechanical skills served him well. He could follow instructions precisely, work efficiently, and maintain the kind of attention to detail that Webb clearly valued. By the end of the day, he'd helped modify 2 vehicles and gained a clear understanding of how the operation worked. The vehicles came in with legitimate repair orders, got modified in the secure bays, then went out to clients who would load them with whatever they needed to transport. After delivery, the vehicles would return for warranty work, and the compartments would be removed, returning the vehicles to factory specifications. It was elegant, profitable, and almost impossible to detect without inside knowledge. At 5:30 p.m., Webb dismissed him. "Good first day, Hayes. You've got good hands and you follow instructions. Keep that up and you'll do fine here." Noah drove home in a daze, his mind cataloging everything he'd seen and heard. The moment he was clear of the area, he called Monroe on the encrypted phone. "I've got details on their modification process," he said without preamble. "They're moving product through modified luxury vehicles. The modifications are temporary and expertly done. Anyone inspecting the vehicles would need to know exactly what they're looking for." "How many vehicles are they processing?" "I saw 4 today, but Webb mentioned they average about 10 to 12 per week. If each vehicle is carrying even a moderate amount of product, that's a significant operation." "It is." "What about Kozlov? Did you see him?" "Briefly. He came through the garage once, checking on work. Didn't speak to me directly, but I got the impression he watches everything carefully." "Keep documenting everything you can. How are you holding up?" Noah paused, thinking about how to answer honestly. "I'm managing. It's weird, being back in a situation where I have to stay hyper-aware all the time. But I can handle it." "And Maddie?" "She's fine. Doesn't suspect anything. As far as she knows, I just started a new job at a car garage." "Good. Keep it that way. The less she knows, the safer she is." After hanging up, Noah picked up Maddie from the after-school program, helped her with homework, made dinner, and went through the normal evening routine. But the whole time, part of his mind was still at Elite European Motors, processing what he'd learned and planning his next moves. 3 days passed in similar fashion. Noah went to work, documented everything he could, checked in with Monroe twice daily, and maintained his cover as a grateful employee who'd found a good job. He learned more about the operation's logistics, memorized faces and names, and began to understand the hierarchy of the organization. Webb reported to Daniel Reeves, who reported to Kozlov. Below that were the mechanics like Noah, the drivers who transported the vehicles, and what appeared to be a security team that Noah occasionally saw but hadn't yet interacted with. The whole operation was compartmentalized. No one person knew everything, and everyone understood that discretion was paramount. On his 4th day, Noah was working on a Mercedes S-Class when his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Just an address and a time. 2247 Industrial Parkway, 8 p.m. tonight. Come alone. Noah's blood ran cold. This was either a test or a trap, and he had no way of knowing which until he showed up. He finished his shift, picked up Maddie, and as soon as she was settled with dinner and a movie, he called Monroe from the bathroom with the water running to cover his voice. "I got a text. They want me at an address tonight at 8, Industrial Parkway." "That's one of their distribution points," Monroe said, her voice sharp with concern. "We've had surveillance on it, but we've never been able to get anyone inside. This could be your break, Hayes. Or it could be them testing you to see if you're FBI." "What do I do?" "You go. But we'll have teams positioned nearby. If you hit the panic button, we'll be there in under 2 minutes. 2 minutes is a long time when someone's pointing a gun at you." "I know. But if you don't show up, they'll know something's wrong. This is what you signed up for." Noah ended the call and stood there in his bathroom, staring at his reflection in the mirror. The man looking back at him was tired, stressed, and about to walk into a situation that could go sideways in 100 different ways. He thought about not going, about grabbing Maddie and running, disappearing into witness protection and never looking back. But then he thought about Sarah, about the drugs that killed her, about every other family destroyed by the products this organization moved. And he knew he couldn't walk away now, not when he was this close to gathering the evidence Monroe needed to shut the whole thing down. At 7:45 p.m., after making sure Maddie was safely at the neighbor's apartment, Mrs. Chen, an older woman who'd been happy to watch her for a few hours, Noah drove toward the industrial area on the south side of Atlanta. The address led him to a large warehouse complex, the kind of anonymous commercial space that dotted the city's less scenic neighborhoods. The parking lot was mostly empty except for a few vehicles, including a black BMW that Noah recognized from the garage. He parked, sent a quick text to Monroe with his location, and climbed out of his truck. The encrypted phone was in his pocket, the panic button easily accessible. Noah walked toward the warehouse entrance, every sense on high alert, his body falling into that hyper-aware state that had kept him alive in Afghanistan. The door was unlocked. Inside, the warehouse was dimly lit, filled with industrial shelving and what looked like legitimate auto parts inventory. At the far end, light spilled from an office space, and Noah could hear voices. He walked toward the voices, his footsteps echoing in the vast space. And then he stopped cold. Because sitting at a desk in the office, reviewing papers with Vincent Kozlov, was someone Noah recognized, someone he'd seen 3 days ago at the FBI field office during his briefing. It was Special Agent Oliver Dane, one of the tactical team members who'd been part of Monroe's unit. And he was here, in a criminal warehouse, having what looked like a very friendly conversation with the man Noah was supposed to be investigating. Noah's mind raced through possibilities. Undercover operation within an operation? Deep cover assignment Monroe hadn't told him about? But then Kozlov handed Dane an envelope, and Dane opened it to reveal thick stacks of cash, and Dane smiled, pocketing the envelope without hesitation. Not undercover. Dirty. The FBI had a mole, and Noah had just stumbled into the one piece of information that could get him killed faster than anything else. Kozlov looked up, saw Noah standing in the doorway, and smiled that cold smile that never reached his eyes. "Ah, Mr. Hayes, right on time. Come in. I believe you've met my friend Oliver before, though perhaps not in this context. We have some things we need to discuss." Noah's hand moved toward his pocket, toward the panic button, but before he could reach it, he felt something hard press against his back. A voice behind him, low and dangerous, said 3 words that made his blood turn to ice. "Don't even think about it." Noah froze, his hand inches from his pocket, his mind racing through scenarios at lightning speed. The pressure against his back was unmistakable, a gun barrel, pressed firmly against his spine. Behind him, he could hear breathing, controlled and steady, the kind that came from someone comfortable with violence. "Hands where I can see them," the voice commanded. "Slow and easy." Noah raised his hands carefully, his combat training screaming at him to assess, adapt, act. But with a gun at his back and Kozlov watching from the office with that cold, calculating expression, his options were severely limited. The encrypted phone in his pocket might as well have been on the moon for all the good it would do him now. "Search him," Kozlov ordered, standing up from behind the desk. Agent Dane, or whatever he really was, remained seated, watching the scene unfold with the detached interest of someone observing a particularly interesting chess match. Rough hands patted Noah down efficiently, finding the encrypted phone within seconds. The man behind him, Noah still couldn't see who it was, pulled it from his pocket and tossed it to Kozlov, who caught it with one hand and studied it with interest. "FBI issue," Kozlov observed, turning the phone over in his hands. "Encrypted communications, panic button on the side, probably GPS tracking built into the hardware. Very professional, Mr. Hayes, or should I say, Agent Hayes." "I'm not FBI," Noah said, keeping his voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding his system. "I don't know what that is. Maybe it was in my pocket from—" "Please," Kozlov interrupted, holding up one hand. "Let's not insult each other's intelligence. You've been working for Agent Monroe for 4 days now, documenting our operations, reporting back twice daily. We've known since your 2nd day. The only question was whether to eliminate you immediately or see what the FBI thought they knew about our operations." Noah's mind was reeling, but he forced himself to focus. If they'd known for 2 days, why let him keep working? Why bring him here instead of just making him disappear? "The reason you're still alive," Kozlov continued, as if reading his thoughts, "is because you're more valuable as a source of information than as a body in the river. Oliver here has been keeping us informed about the FBI's investigation, but there are details about Monroe's specific operation that even he doesn't have access to. You're going to fill in those gaps." Oliver Dane finally stood up, walking over to examine Noah with the clinical detachment of a scientist studying a lab rat. Up close, Noah could see the signs he'd missed before. the slight nervousness around the eyes, the telltale swagger of someone living beyond their means. How long had Dane been on Kozlov's payroll? How much damage had he done? "He won't talk," Dane said dismissively. "He's military. They train them to resist interrogation. We're wasting time. Just dispose of him and move on." "Perhaps," Kozlov said thoughtfully, "but Mr. Hayes has something most undercover agents don't have. He has a daughter, 7 years old, I believe. Maddie. Goes to Pine Ridge Elementary, currently staying with your neighbor, Mrs. Chen, while you're out on this little evening adventure." The mention of Maddie's name sent a bolt of pure terror through Noah's chest. His hands, still raised, began to shake slightly before he clenched them into fists to hide the tremor. "You're going to leave her out of this," Noah said, his voice dropping into a register that his old platoon would have recognized, the tone he used right before violence erupted. "That depends entirely on you," Kozlov replied calmly. He gestured to a chair. "Please, sit down. Marcus, you can lower your weapon. Mr. Hayes isn't going to do anything foolish while we're discussing his daughter's safety." The pressure left Noah's back, and he turned to see Marcus Webb, his supervisor from the garage, holding a Sig Sauer P-26 with the casual competence of someone who'd used it before. Webb's expression was apologetic but firm, just a man doing his job, even if that job involved potentially executing a coworker. Noah sat down slowly, his mind working through possibilities. Monroe and her team were positioned nearby, waiting for the panic signal. But the phone was now in Kozlov's possession, and Noah had no way to trigger it. Even if he could somehow activate it, would the FBI team arrive in time? And if they did, would they find him alive or dead? More importantly, Kozlov had just revealed that he knew where Maddie was right now. If Noah didn't play this carefully, his daughter could become a target. "Let me explain your situation," Kozlov said, settling back into his chair while Dane stood behind him like a corrupt guardian angel. "The FBI thinks they're running an undercover operation. They think they're clever, using you as bait to infiltrate our organization. What they don't know is that Oliver has been providing us with information about their investigation for the past 8 months. We've been feeding them intelligence, allowing them to make small arrests, giving them enough to think they're making progress while protecting our actual operations." "You're running them," Noah said quietly, understanding dawning. "The whole investigation is compromised." "Not entirely," Kozlov admitted. "Agent Monroe is smart and careful. She doesn't share everything with her team, which is why Oliver's information has gaps. That's where you come in. You're going to tell me everything Monroe has planned, every piece of evidence she thinks she has, every operation she's preparing to execute. And if I don't?" Kozlov's expression didn't change, but something cold flickered in his eyes. "Then Marcus will visit Mrs. Chen's apartment. There will be a gas leak. Very tragic. An elderly woman and a small child overcome by carbon monoxide before anyone realizes what's happening. These things happen in older buildings." The casual way Kozlov described murdering his daughter made Noah's vision go red around the edges. Every instinct he had screamed at him to launch himself across the desk, to wrap his hands around Kozlov's throat and squeeze until the life left those cold eyes. But Webb still had the gun, and Dane was armed too. Noah could see the bulge under his jacket. He'd be dead before he made it halfway across the room, and Maddie would still be in danger. "You're bluffing," Noah said, though he didn't believe it. "Killing a child brings too much attention. Police, media, FBI crawling all over. Accidents bring sympathy, not investigation," Kozlov interrupted. "And frankly, Mr. Hayes, I've been in this business long enough to know that sometimes you have to make hard decisions to protect your interests. Your daughter's life matters to you. To me, she's just leverage. The question is whether you value her life more than your loyalty to the FBI." Noah looked at Oliver Dane, seeing his own potential future in the corrupt agent's face. How had Dane rationalized it? How had he gone from swearing to uphold the law to taking money from the criminals he was supposed to be catching? "How much did they pay you?" Noah asked Dane directly. "What's the going rate for betraying everything you stood for?" Dane's jaw tightened. "You don't understand. The FBI doesn't pay enough to live on, not in this city, not with the expectations they have. I was drowning in debt, my marriage was falling apart, and the Bureau's solution was to offer me counseling and a pat on the back. Kozlov offered me a way out. He offered you blood money. How many people died because of information you provided? Enough, Kozlov snapped, his patience clearly wearing thin. This isn't a therapy session. Mr. Hayes, you have a simple choice. Either you cooperate and your daughter stays safe, or you refuse and she becomes collateral damage. I'll give you 60 seconds to decide. Noah's mind raced. If he cooperated, he'd be betraying Monroe and potentially destroying the entire investigation. The organization would continue operating, more people would die from their products, and he'd become exactly what Dane had become, a man who'd sold his soul for security. But if he refused, Maddie would die. His 7-year-old daughter, who still believed the world was fundamentally good, who drew pictures of rainbows and dreamed about seeing whale sharks at the aquarium, would be murdered because of his choices. There was no good option. There was only varying degrees of terrible. I need proof, Noah said finally, his voice hoarse. Proof that you can actually get to her. For all I know, the FBI has already moved her to a safe location. Kozlov smiled and pulled out his phone, tapping the screen a few times before turning it to show Noah. It was a live security feed. Noah recognized it as coming from the nanny cam Mrs. Chen had mentioned keeping in her living room. The image showed Maddie sitting on Mrs. Chen's couch, watching TV and eating popcorn, completely unaware that she was being monitored by the man threatening her life. The timestamp showed it was current, live footage. We've had access to Mrs. Chen's network for 2 days, Kozlov explained. We've been watching your daughter, learning her routine, identifying vulnerabilities. The FBI surveillance team outside your apartment building is focused on the entrances and exits. They're not watching Mrs. Chen's apartment 3 floors up. It would take us less than 5 minutes to get someone inside. Noah stared at the image of his daughter, so innocent and unaware, and felt something break inside him. He'd survived 3 tours in Afghanistan. He'd survived losing his wife. He'd survived 6 years of struggling to build a normal life. But this, watching his daughter's life being used as leverage while she ate popcorn and watched cartoons, this might finally be the thing that destroyed him. What do you want to know? Noah asked quietly, defeat heavy in his voice. Kozlov leaned forward, satisfaction gleaming in his cold eyes. Everything. Start with what Monroe has told you about the investigation's scope. How many agencies are involved? What evidence do they think they have? What operations are they planning? Noah took a breath, preparing to betray everything he'd been working for, when suddenly the warehouse lights went out. Not flickering, not dimming, completely out, plunging the space into absolute darkness. In that moment of confusion, Noah's combat training took over. He dropped from the chair and rolled left, away from where Webb had been standing. Gunfire erupted, muzzle flashes providing brief snapshots of illumination. Webb was firing where Noah had been sitting. Dane was drawing his weapon, spinning toward the entrance. And through the darkness, Noah heard a voice he recognized, Monroe, shouting with tactical authority. FBI, everybody down, drop your weapons! Flashlight beams cut through the darkness as FBI tactical teams poured into the warehouse. Noah stayed low, crawling toward the office wall, trying to put solid cover between himself and the gunfire. More shots rang out, Webb firing at the advancing agents, Dane scrambling for the back exit. Kozlov had disappeared in the chaos. Noah heard Monroe's voice again, closer now. Hayes, if you can hear me, stay down. I'm behind the desk, Noah shouted back. Webb has a SIG. Dane's armed. Kozlov went toward the rear of the building. Tactical lights swept across the office space. Noah saw Webb silhouetted against the glare, still trying to aim at the advancing agents. Then a precise 3-round burst from one of the tactical team's weapons dropped him. Webb went down hard, the SIG clattering away across the concrete floor. Clear! 1 suspect down! An agent called out. We've got a runner in the back, another voice reported. Male, white, expensive suit. Looks like our primary target. Monroe appeared at the office doorway, her weapon drawn, her eyes scanning for threats before settling on Noah. You okay? I'm fine. Maddie, they were watching her through Mrs. Chen's nanny cam. They threatened, We've got teams moving on your apartment building right now, Monroe said, pulling him to his feet. As soon as we saw Kozlov's security hack on the camera feed, we moved up the operation timeline. Your daughter is being moved to a secure location as we speak. Relief flooded through Noah so intensely that his knees nearly buckled. How did you know? Because Oliver Dane isn't as smart as he thinks he is. Monroe's expression was grim. We've known he was compromised for 3 weeks. We've been feeding him false information and monitoring what he passed along to Kozlov. When they texted you tonight, we knew it was a trap. We just needed to let it play out long enough to catch them in the act. You used me as bait, Noah said, anger starting to replace relief. Without telling me. We used everyone as bait, Hayes, including myself. Do you think I didn't know there was a mole in my team? The only way to catch a traitor is to make them think they're winning. She gestured toward the front of the warehouse, where tactical teams were setting up a perimeter. Come on, we need to get you out of here and reunited with your daughter. What about Kozlov and Dane? Dane won't get far. We've got teams on every exit. As for Kozlov, Monroe's jaw tightened. He's slippery, but we've got eyes on 3 possible escape routes. We'll find him. They made it halfway to the warehouse entrance when gunfire erupted from the rear of the building. Not the controlled bursts of tactical team weapons, but the rapid, panicked firing of someone desperate. Noah's combat instincts kicked in again, and he grabbed Monroe's arm, pulling her behind a concrete support pillar. That's coming from the vehicle bay, Monroe said, speaking into her radio. All teams, what's your status on the rear exit? The radio crackled. We've got 2 suspects pinned down near the loading docks. One appears to be Agent Dane. The other matches Kozlov's description. They've got a vehicle and they're laying down covering fire. Do not let them reach that vehicle, Monroe ordered. Use non-lethal measures if possible, but stop them. More gunfire, shouting, the screech of tires on concrete. Then a massive explosion that shook the entire warehouse, followed by a fireball that lit up the night sky visible through the high windows. Monroe's radio erupted with voices, everyone talking at once. She sorted through the chaos with practiced efficiency. Say again, what happened? Vehicle attempted to breach the perimeter. We had a spike strip deployed. Vehicle hit the strip, lost control, impacted a concrete barrier. Secondary explosion from fuel tank. Both occupants were still inside. Noah and Monroe ran toward the rear of the warehouse, joining the tactical teams that had converged on the loading dock area. The scene was chaos. A BMW engulfed in flames, black smoke pouring into the night sky, agents with fire extinguishers trying to control the blaze. 2 bodies were visible inside the burning vehicle, past the point where any rescue was possible. Kozlov and Dane? Monroe asked one of the tactical team leaders. We're still confirming, but yes, ma'am. They were the only 2 who reached the vehicle. Nobody else got out. Monroe stood there for a long moment, watching the vehicle burn, her expression unreadable. Noah knew what she was thinking. A dead suspect couldn't testify, couldn't provide information about the larger organization, couldn't help them roll up the network. But a dead suspect also couldn't hurt anyone else. What about the others? Noah asked. Webb, the mechanics at the garage, all the people working for Kozlov? We've got teams hitting every location simultaneously. Elite European Motors, 3 warehouse facilities, 2 residential properties. We'll round up everyone associated with the operation. Monroe turned to face him. Thanks to the information you provided over the past 4 days, we have enough evidence to dismantle the entire network. Vehicle modification records, financial transactions, shipment schedules, all of it. But without Kozlov, you can't prove the cartel connection. You can't roll it up the chain. Not tonight, no. But we've dealt a significant blow to their operations, and we've removed a corrupt agent who was compromising investigations. That counts for something. She gestured toward a waiting FBI vehicle. Come on, let's get you to your daughter. The drive to the secure location where Maddie had been taken felt like it took hours, though it was probably only 20 minutes. Noah sat in the back of the FBI SUV, his mind replaying the events of the night. He'd come within seconds of breaking, of betraying everything to protect his daughter. Would he have done it? If Monroe's team hadn't arrived when they did, would Noah Hayes have become the next Oliver Dane? He wanted to believe he would have found another way, some clever solution that saved both Maddie and the investigation. But honest self-assessment, the kind the Army had drilled into him, forced him to admit the truth. He would have told Kozlov everything, without hesitation, without regret. Because at the end of the day, Maddie was his world, and no mission, no matter how important, was worth losing her. The secure location turned out to be a FBI safe house in a suburban neighborhood, a nondescript ranch home that could have belonged to anyone. Agent Parks met them at the door, her expression sympathetic. She's fine. Parks said immediately, seeing the worry on Noah's face. Scared and confused about why strangers came to get her, but physically fine. We told her you were in an accident and needed her to come with us until you could get to the hospital. She's been asking for you. Noah barely heard the rest. He pushed past Parks and into the house, following the sound of Maddie's voice. She was in the living room, sitting on a couch with her stuffed bunny clutched to her chest, talking to another FBI agent who was clearly trying to distract her with a tablet showing videos. "Daddy!" Maddie saw him and launched herself off the couch, running across the room and throwing herself into his arms with the full force of a 7-year-old who'd been terrified her father was hurt. Noah caught her and held on tight, burying his face in her hair, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo. His hands were shaking again, but this time from relief so intense it felt like physical pain. "I'm okay, baby bird," he whispered. "I'm right here. I'm okay." "The lady said you were in an accident. She said you were at the hospital. Are you hurt?" Maddie pulled back to examine his face, her small hands touching his cheeks as if checking for injuries. "I'm fine. There was a situation at work, but I'm not hurt. And you're safe. That's all that matters." "Why did those people come to get me? I was watching TV with Mrs. Chen, and then they came and said we had to go right away, and Mrs. Chen was scared and—" "I know, sweetheart. I'm sorry you were scared. But it's over now. Everything's going to be okay." Monroe appeared in the doorway, giving Noah a moment before clearing her throat softly. "Mr. Hayes, we need to debrief while events are still fresh. Agent Parks can stay with Maddie if—" "No." Noah's voice was firm. "I'm not leaving her again tonight. Whatever you need can wait until morning, or you can ask your questions while I'm sitting right here with my daughter." Monroe studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Fair enough. Parks, can you get Maddie set up in one of the bedrooms? Maybe find her something to watch on TV while Mr. Hayes and I talk?" It took some convincing, but Maddie eventually agreed to go with Agent Parks, extracting a promise from Noah that he would come check on her in 10 minutes. Once she was out of earshot, Monroe sat down across from Noah and pulled out a digital recorder. "I know you're exhausted," she began, "but I need to get your account of what happened tonight while it's still fresh. Start from when you received the text message." Noah walked her through the entire evening, the summons to the warehouse, discovering Dane's betrayal, Kozlov's threats against Maddie, the moment when he'd been seconds away from breaking. Monroe listened without interrupting, her expression growing darker as he described how Kozlov had shown him the live feed of his daughter. "I was going to tell him everything," Noah admitted. "If your team hadn't arrived when they did, I would have given him every piece of information he asked for. I want you to know that. I want it on the record." "I understand," Monroe said quietly. "And for what it's worth, I would have done the same thing in your position. Our job is to catch criminals, but we're human beings first. No one would fault you for protecting your daughter." Dane faulted himself for a lot less than that. How long had he been on Kozlov's payroll? "We're still piecing together the timeline, but it looks like about 10 months. Started small, just information about ongoing investigations, nothing that seemed too damaging. But once they had him, they owned him. Every piece of information they got through him made him more valuable to them and more trapped. By the end, he was in too deep to get out." "Could he have? If he'd come to you, admitted what he'd done, could you have helped him?" Monroe was quiet for a long moment. "Maybe. If he'd come forward early enough, before too much damage was done. But Oliver made his choices, and tonight he paid for them. I can't say I'm sorry he's dead, Hayes. He betrayed everything we stand for, and people died because of information he provided." Noah understood that logic, but he also couldn't shake the image of Dane's face when he'd talked about drowning in debt and failing marriages. How close had Noah himself come to making similar choices? What would have happened if Kozlov had approached him before the FBI did, offering money for his skills and asking fewer questions? "What happens now?" Noah asked. "You said you're rounding up everyone associated with the operation." "We are. Within the next few hours, we'll have dozens of people in custody. Between the evidence you helped gather and what we're seizing tonight, we'll be able to dismantle this money laundering network completely. It won't stop the cartel. They'll just set up new fronts, new operations, but we've slowed them down significantly." "And me? What happens to my family?" "You're done, Hayes. Your part in this operation is over. We'll need you for testimony if cases go to trial, but otherwise, you're free to go back to your life." Monroe paused. "With appropriate compensation, of course. You fulfilled your contract with us, and you'll receive full payment plus a bonus for the risks you took. It should be enough to get you and Maddie on stable financial footing." The money felt dirty somehow, tainted by association with everything that had happened. But Noah also knew he couldn't afford pride. Maddie needed stability, needed security, needed a father who wasn't constantly stressed about bills and debt. "There's one more thing," Monroe continued. "Given what happened tonight, there's a possibility that other members of the organization might come looking for revenge. We don't think it's likely. With Kozlov dead, the operation is essentially decapitated, but we'd like to offer you protective surveillance for the next few months, just until we're certain there's no blowback." Noah thought about Maddie, about the fear she'd felt tonight when strangers had come to take her away. How much surveillance, how much security, how much fear could he subject her to before it damaged her? "How long?" he asked. "Minimum 3 months. Probably not more than 6. And it'll be discreet. You'll barely notice it's there." "I'll think about it," Noah said, which was the best he could offer right now. His brain was too tired, too overwhelmed to make any more decisions tonight. Monroe stood up, pocketing the recorder. "You should be able to take Maddie home tomorrow. We'll have agents drive you, help you get resettled. And Hayes, I know tonight was rough, but you should know. What you did over the past 4 days potentially saved lives. The drugs that won't be distributed because of this operation, the money that won't fund further criminal activity, that's on you. You made a difference." After Monroe left, Noah went to check on Maddie. He found her in a small bedroom, curled up under a blanket that Agent Parks had provided, her stuffed bunny tucked under one arm. She was fighting sleep, her eyes heavy but determined to stay awake until her father appeared. "Hey, baby bird," Noah said softly, sitting on the edge of the bed. "How are you doing?" "I don't like this place," Maddie said. "It's not home. It smells weird and I don't have my regular blanket." "I know, but we'll go home tomorrow, I promise. Tonight we just need to stay here where it's safe." "Why? What happened, Daddy? And don't say it was just an accident. I'm not a baby. I know something bad happened." Noah looked at his daughter, seeing the intelligence in her eyes, the awareness that came from being raised by a single father who'd been through trauma. She was right. She wasn't a baby. She deserved some version of the truth. "You're right," he said finally. "Something bad did happen. The new job I started, it turned out the people I was working for weren't good people. They were doing illegal things. And tonight, when they found out I knew about it, they got angry. But the police came and stopped them, and now it's over." "Were you scared?" "Yeah, sweetheart. I was very scared, especially because I was worried they might try to hurt you." Maddie processed this, her small face serious. "But you kept me safe, you and the FBI ladies." "We did, and we always will." Noah leaned down to kiss her forehead. "Now try to get some sleep. Tomorrow we'll go home and everything will go back to normal." "Promise?" "Promise." But as Noah sat there watching his daughter fall asleep, he wondered if anything would ever truly be normal again. He'd crossed into a world of violence and criminality, had seen the worst of what people could do to each other, and had come within seconds of losing everything that mattered. How did you go back to normal after that? The next morning, true to Monroe's word, FBI agents drove Noah and Maddie back to their apartment. The building looked the same as always, paint still peeling in the stairwell, the smell of someone cooking breakfast drifting through the halls, normal life continuing as if nothing had changed. But everything had changed. Noah saw it in the way he automatically scanned for threats while climbing the stairs. The way his hand went to his pocket where the encrypted phone used to be before he remembered it had been confiscated as evidence. The way he double-checked the locks and looked out the window before letting Maddie settle back into her room. Mrs. Chen came by an hour later, worried and apologetic. "I'm so sorry about last night. Those people said you'd been hurt and they needed to take Maddie right away. I should have called you first, but they showed me badges, and I thought..." "It's okay, Mrs. Chen," Noah assured her. "You did the right thing. Everything worked out fine." Over the next few days, life developed a new routine. Noah didn't go back to work. Monroe had advised him to stay home until they were certain there was no retaliation coming. The FBI surveillance team was parked outside in an unmarked van, though they changed vehicles every day to maintain the illusion of normalcy. Maddie went back to school, though Noah found himself watching the drop-off area longer than usual, scanning faces in the crowd, making sure she was safely inside before he left. The money came through exactly when Monroe said it would. $60,000 deposited into Noah's account, with a form letter thanking him for his service as a federal contractor. It was more money than he'd ever had at one time, and it felt surreal seeing his bank balance actually show a positive number with multiple digits. Noah paid off the back rent first, then the medical debt. Then he opened a savings account for Maddie's college fund and put $20,000 into it. The rest he kept as a buffer against future emergencies, though part of him wondered what kind of emergencies he was preparing for now. 2 weeks after the warehouse incident, Agent Monroe came by the apartment for a final debriefing. Noah made coffee while she sat at his kitchen table, looking more tired than he'd ever seen her. The operation had clearly taken its toll. "We've wrapped up most of the arrests," she told him. 43 people in custody, including mechanics, drivers, money handlers, and several members of Kozlov's security team. The car garage has been seized as a criminal asset. We've frozen approximately $8 million in accounts connected to the operation. "And the cartel?" Monroe's expression soured. "Still operating, unfortunately. We hurt them, cost them money, disrupted their distribution network, forced them to rebuild from scratch, but we didn't destroy them. These organizations are like Hydra heads. Cut one off and two more grow back." "So it was all for nothing?" "No, Hayes. It wasn't for nothing. You helped us take down a major money laundering operation, remove a corrupt federal agent, and seize enough drugs to stock a pharmacy. That's not nothing. It's just not everything." Noah absorbed this, feeling the weight of incomplete victory. In Afghanistan, he'd felt the same way. They'd complete a mission, eliminate a target, achieve their objective, but the war continued. The enemy adapted, regrouped, came back. Maybe that's all you could ever hope for, to win individual battles while accepting that the war was never truly over. "There's something else," Monroe said, pulling an envelope from her briefcase. "The Bureau wanted me to give you this personally." Inside the envelope was a letter on official FBI letterhead, signed by someone whose title included multiple acronyms Noah didn't recognize. It thanked him for his service, commended his bravery, and included an open invitation to apply for a position with the Bureau if he was ever interested in law enforcement work. Noah read it twice, then set it on the table. "They're recruiting me." "They're giving you an option," Monroe corrected. "You've got skills that would be valuable in federal law enforcement: combat training, mechanical expertise, the ability to think on your feet under pressure. If you wanted to make this kind of work a career instead of a one-time thing, the door is open." "And if I don't want that? If I just want to go back to fixing cars and raising my daughter?" "Then you go back to fixing cars and raising your daughter. No one's going to pressure you, Hayes. You've done your part. Whatever comes next is entirely your choice." After Monroe left, Noah sat at his kitchen table with the letter in front of him and thought about choices. He could take the FBI up on their offer, train for a new career in law enforcement, use his skills to continue fighting the kind of people who'd destroyed his wife. It would give his life purpose, meaning, a sense that he was making a difference in the world. But it would also mean more danger, more violence, more nights away from Maddie. More situations where he'd have to choose between duty and family, between what was right and what was safe. Noah picked up the letter and walked to Maddie's room. She was on her bed drawing another picture. This one showed their apartment building again, but this time there were people in the windows, families, normal people living normal lives. "What do you think?" she asked, holding it up for inspection. "I'm going to give it to Mrs. Chen, since she was nice to me that scary night. I think it's beautiful, baby bird." Noah sat down next to her, the letter still in his hand. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure, Daddy." "Do you remember what I told you about my job, how I found out the people I was working for were bad people?" "Yeah, you helped stop them, like a hero." Noah smiled despite himself. "I don't know about hero, but yeah, I helped stop them. And now some people are saying I could do that kind of work as a real job, helping the police catch bad guys. What do you think about that?" Maddie set down her crayons and looked at him with those serious eyes that made her seem older than 7. "Would it be dangerous?" "Sometimes, yeah." "Would you get hurt?" "I'd try very hard not to." She thought about this for a long moment, then said, I think you should just fix cars, because I like having a daddy who comes home every night. And just like that, Noah's decision was made. He took the FBI letter, walked to the kitchen, and filed it carefully in a drawer where important documents lived. Maybe someday he'd pull it out and reconsider. Maybe someday he'd want to return to that world of purpose and danger and fighting for something bigger than himself. But today his daughter needed him here. Safe, present, alive. Noah pulled out his phone and called a number he'd been avoiding, Carl at Morton's Auto Repair. The conversation was awkward, but ended with an offer to come back whenever he was ready. The pay would never make him rich, but it would pay the bills. And with the FBI money as a buffer, Noah could actually build a life instead of just surviving day to day. That evening, after dinner and homework and the usual bedtime routine, Noah stood at his kitchen window looking out over Atlanta's nighttime skyline. Somewhere out there, criminals were planning operations. Somewhere out there, FBI agents were working to stop them. Somewhere out there, the war continued. But here, in this small apartment with its peeling paint and secondhand furniture, Noah Hayes had finally found something worth more than any mission objective. He had found peace. And that night, for the first time in years, Noah Hayes slept deeply and dreamlessly, with his daughter safe in the next room and no encrypted phone buzzing with urgent messages. The storm had passed, and morning would bring a new kind of normal, one built not on adrenaline and danger, but on the quiet satisfaction of being exactly where he needed to be. 3 months passed with the kind of peaceful monotony that Noah had once taken for granted, but now treasured like gold. He returned to Morton's Auto Repair, and Carl welcomed him back with gruff understanding and no questions about where he'd been. The work was exactly as mundane as it had always been: oil changes, brake repairs, the occasional transmission job, but Noah found himself grateful for every predictable, safe moment of it. Maddie thrived with the stability. Her nightmares about the scary night, as she called it, gradually faded into the background noise of childhood fears that could be soothed with a nightlight and her father's presence. She threw herself into school with renewed energy, bringing home artwork and spelling tests and stories about her friends that Noah listened to with the kind of attention most people reserved for crucial business meetings. The FBI surveillance team had been reduced to periodic check-ins after the first month, and by the third month, Agent Monroe called to tell Noah they were pulling the protection detail entirely. No credible threats had materialized, and with most of Kozlov's organization either in custody or scattered to the winds, the danger had passed. "You're officially off our radar," Monroe told him during their final phone call. "How does it feel?" "Strange," Noah admitted. "I spent 3 months looking over my shoulder, and now I have to remember not to." "That's normal. The hypervigilance will fade with time. Just live your life, Hayes. You've earned it." But life had a way of refusing to stay simple, and Noah should have known better than to expect anything different. It was a Thursday morning in late January, cold and gray with the kind of drizzle that made Atlanta feel like a different city entirely. Noah was under the hood of a Camry, diagnosing a mysterious rattle, when Carl appeared at his elbow with an expression that immediately put Noah on alert. "There's someone here to see you," Carl said. "Says it's important. She's waiting out front." Noah wiped his hands on a shop rag and walked to the front office, expecting maybe an FBI agent with follow-up questions or paperwork to sign. What he found instead was a woman in her mid-30s, expensively dressed in a way that stood out in the utilitarian surroundings of an auto repair shop. She had dark hair, Mediterranean features, and eyes that assessed Noah with the kind of careful attention that set off every alarm bell his training had installed. "Mr. Hayes," she said, extending her hand, "my name is Sofia Cardenas. I was hoping we could talk privately." Noah didn't take her hand. "Who are you?" "Someone with information you need to hear. Please, it's important. Just 10 minutes of your time." Every instinct Noah had screamed danger, but curiosity and the nagging sense that unfinished business was finally catching up to him made him nod. He led her to a small break room in the back, closing the door and positioning himself between her and the exit. "You have 5 minutes," he said. "Talk." Sofia Cardenas sat down gracefully, crossing her legs and studying Noah with that same careful assessment. "You probably don't know who I am, but I know quite a bit about you. Former Army Ranger, single father, the man who helped the FBI bring down Vincent Kozlov's operation 3 months ago." That's public record if you know where to look. Get to the point. The point, Mr. Hayes, is that Vincent Kozlov didn't die in that warehouse fire, and he's very interested in having a conversation with you. The words hit Noah like a physical blow. He'd watched the vehicle burn, had seen the bodies inside, had read Monroe's reports confirming that both Kozlov and Dane had been killed in the crash and subsequent fire. The dental records had matched. The case had been closed. "You're lying," Noah said flatly. "Kozlov's dead. I saw the body." "You saw a body," Sophia corrected. "Badly burned, barely identifiable, matched through dental records that Vincent had prepared years ago as insurance. The man who died in that car was a driver named Marcus Webb. The other body was Agent Dane. Vincent escaped in the confusion." Marcus Webb. Noah remembered the man, his supervisor at Elite European Motors, the one who'd held a gun on him in the warehouse. Webb had been behind him during the chaos when the FBI teams had stormed in, and in the darkness and confusion, with everyone shooting and running, it would have been easy enough for someone to switch places, to put on a different jacket, to let someone else take the fatal ride while you slipped away in the shadows. "Why would Kozlov want to talk to me?" Noah asked, his mind already racing through implications. If Kozlov was alive, then Maddie was still in danger. The peaceful 3 months had been an illusion, a brief reprieve before the real threat returned. "Because you're a loose end," Sophia said simply, "and Vincent doesn't like loose ends. But more than that, he's impressed with you. The way you handled yourself, the skills you demonstrated, the fact that you were willing to sacrifice everything for your daughter, these are qualities he values. He wants to offer you a proposition. I'm not interested in any propositions from a man who threatened my child. Even if refusing means that threat becomes reality?" Sophia's voice was calm, almost clinical. "Vincent is many things, Mr. Hayes, but he's not unreasonable. He understands that you were doing what you thought was right. He respects that, even if it cost him dearly. What he can't respect is the possibility that you might continue to be a problem for him." "So this is what? A recruitment pitch with an implied threat?" "It's an invitation to a conversation. Tomorrow night, 8 p.m., at a location I'll text you. Come alone, obviously. If you bring the FBI or any other law enforcement, Vincent will know, and this opportunity will evaporate along with any chance of resolving this peacefully." Noah's hands clenched into fists at his sides. "And if I don't come?" Sophia stood up, smoothing her expensive skirt. "Then Vincent will conclude that you remain a threat to his operations, and threats get eliminated, Mr. Hayes, along with anyone who might be used as leverage against them." She paused at the door. "He's giving you a chance to end this without anyone getting hurt. I'd suggest you take it." After she left, Noah stood in the break room for a full 5 minutes, his mind working through possibilities and scenarios. He could call Monroe immediately, tell her that Kozlov was alive and trying to make contact. The FBI would set up another operation, use Noah as bait again, try to capture Kozlov once and for all. But the first attempt had nearly gotten Maddie killed. And Kozlov had proven he could slip away even when surrounded by federal agents. What would stop him from doing it again, while making sure Noah and his daughter paid the price for the betrayal? Or Noah could go to the meeting, hear what Kozlov had to say, and make his decision based on actual information instead of speculation and fear. The encrypted phone was gone, confiscated as evidence, and never returned. But Noah still had Monroe's regular number saved in his contacts. His thumb hovered over her name for a long moment before he made his decision. Not yet. First, he needed to know what Kozlov actually wanted. Then, he could decide how to respond. That evening, Noah sat at the kitchen table with Maddie doing her homework, trying to act normal while his mind churned through worst-case scenarios. Maddie sensed something was off, kids always did, and kept giving him concerned looks between math problems. "You seem worried, Daddy," she said finally, setting down her pencil. "Is something wrong?" Noah forced a smile. "Just thinking about work stuff, baby bird. Nothing for you to worry about." "Is it about the bad people? The ones from before?" The directness of the question caught Noah off guard. "What makes you ask that?" "Because you get the same face you had back then, like you're trying to solve a really hard puzzle, but you don't want me to know about it." Maddie's expression was far too mature for 7 years old. "I'm not a baby, Daddy. I know when you're scared." Noah reached across the table and took her small hand in his. You're right, I am a little worried, but I promise you, I'm going to handle it, and I'm going to keep you safe no matter what, okay? Okay. She squeezed his hand back. But if you need help, you should call Agent Monroe. She was nice. She helped us before. That's good advice, sweetheart. I'll think about it. The next morning, Noah received a text from an unknown number with an address in an industrial area near the airport. The message was simple. 8 p.m. Come alone. No weapons. No wire. We'll be watching. Noah spent the day making preparations. He updated his will, something he should have done years ago, and left it with Carl at the garage along with instructions that if anything happened to him, the envelope should be given to Agent Monroe. He wrote a letter to Maddie, sealed it, and hid it in his apartment where she'd eventually find it if the worst happened. And he called Mrs. Chen and asked if Maddie could stay with her that evening, claiming he had an important meeting that might run late. Of course, Mrs. Chen said, her voice warm with grandmotherly affection. Maddie is always welcome here. You take care of your business. At 7:30 p.m., Noah kissed his daughter goodbye and watched her walk down the hall to Mrs. Chen's apartment, her backpack bouncing with each step. She turned at the door to wave, and Noah waved back, trying to memorize everything about the moment. Her smile, her purple jacket, the way her hair was pulled back in the ponytail she'd recently learned to do herself, just in case it was the last time he saw her. The drive to the meeting location took 20 minutes through early evening traffic. The address led to an abandoned office building, the kind that dotted Atlanta's industrial areas, victims of the recession that had never quite recovered. The parking lot was empty except for a single black Mercedes with tinted windows. Noah parked his truck and sat for a moment, running through everything that could go wrong. Kozlov could just shoot him the moment he walked in. This could be a trap designed to eliminate the one witness who could identify him. Or it could be exactly what Sophia had claimed, an actual attempt at negotiation. Only one way to find out. Noah climbed out of his truck and walked toward the building's entrance. The door was unlocked, opening into a lobby that smelled of mildew and abandonment. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead, creating shadows that moved with nauseating irregularity. At the far end of the lobby, another door stood open, spilling warm light into the gloom. Noah walked through it and found himself in what had once been a conference room. A table sat in the center, and at the head of that table sat Vincent Kozlov, looking exactly as he had 3 months ago. Expensive suit, silver hair, cold eyes that calculated value and threat with every glance. Sofia Cardenas stood behind him, along with 2 large men who were clearly security. Both had the build and bearing of former military, and both had visible weapons holstered at their hips. Mr. Hayes, Kozlov said, gesturing to a chair across from him. Thank you for coming. Please sit. We have much to discuss. Noah remained standing. You threatened my daughter. You tried to have us killed. Why should I discuss anything with you? Because I'm offering you something better than looking over your shoulder for the rest of your life. Kozlov leaned back in his chair, completely at ease despite being wanted by federal law enforcement. Sit down, Mr. Hayes. You're not in danger here. If I wanted you dead, you'd have never made it into the parking lot. The logic was sound, if deeply unsettling. Noah pulled out the chair and sat, keeping his hands visible on the table and his exit routes mapped in his mind. 3 months ago, Kozlov began, you cost me approximately $12 million in assets, got 43 of my employees arrested, and forced me to fake my own death to avoid federal prison. By any reasonable standard, I should want you dead. And yet, here we are, having a civilized conversation. Do you know why? Because you're lonely and needed someone to talk to? Noah's sarcasm earned a thin smile from Kozlov. Because you demonstrated qualities that I value more than money or even revenge. Loyalty, tactical thinking, the ability to make hard decisions under pressure, and above all, a willingness to do whatever it takes to protect what matters to you. Kozlov folded his hands on the table. When you were in that warehouse with a gun to your back, you were seconds away from betraying the FBI to save your daughter. That kind of devotion is rare, Mr. Hayes. It's also exactly what I look for in the people I work with. So this is a job offer. You want me to work for you. Not for me. With me. As a partner in a new operation I'm building. Kozlov pulled out a tablet and slid it across the table. On the screen were photographs of a luxury car dealership, financial spreadsheets, and what looked like architectural plans. I'm starting fresh, learning from the mistakes that allowed the FBI to infiltrate my previous operation. This time, I'm being much more selective about who I bring into my organization. Former military with actual combat experience, people who understand operational security and can be trusted to maintain it. Noah studied the tablet without touching it. And what makes you think I'd ever work with someone who threatened my child? Because I'm offering you something the FBI never could: real security. Not the illusion of safety backed by surveillance teams that eventually get pulled. Not the hope that bad people will simply leave you alone, but actual tangible security for you and your daughter. Kozlov's eyes were intense now, burning with the conviction of someone making a pitch he believed in. I'm offering you $2 million, Mr. Hayes, deposited in an offshore account that no government agency can touch. Enough money to disappear completely, to give Maddie a life anywhere in the world, to never worry about bills or debt, or whether you can afford her college education. $2 million. The number was so absurd that Noah almost laughed. It was more money than he'd make in 20 years of honest work. It was the kind of money that could buy genuine freedom. It was also blood money, paid for with the suffering of countless people destroyed by the drugs and violence that Kozlov's organization trafficked in. And in exchange, Noah asked, what would I have to do for this $2 million? Provide security consultation, help train personnel, use your military experience to help me build an organization that's resistant to law enforcement infiltration. 3 years of work, Mr. Hayes. Just 3 years. Then you take your money, disappear to whatever country sounds nice, and raise your daughter in comfort and safety. 3 years of helping you destroy lives. 3 years of being complicit in everything Sarah died from. Kozlov's expression didn't change. Your wife made her own choices, Mr. Hayes. No one forced her to use. No one held her down and injected her against her will. The drug trade exists because people want what we provide. I simply facilitate supply meeting demand. The rationalization was familiar. Noah had heard versions of it from dealers, users, and everyone in between who wanted to pretend they weren't responsible for the consequences of their choices. It was the same logic that let people sleep at night despite the bodies piling up around them. What happens if I say no? Noah asked. Then you walk out of here, go back to your apartment, pick up your daughter from Mrs. Chen's place, and continue your life. I won't pursue you. I won't threaten you or your family. You'll simply cease to be relevant to my operations. Kozlov paused. However, you should understand that the FBI is still looking for me, and they will eventually find me, just as they found me before. When they do, they'll come looking for everyone associated with my previous operation, including you, Mr. Hayes, including witnesses who might testify about what they saw and heard. The implicit threat was clear. If Kozlov got caught again, Noah would be dragged back into it whether he wanted to be or not. His testimony would be required. His life would be disrupted. Maddie would be exposed to danger again. Unless Kozlov had reason to make sure Noah never testified. Unless Noah became an ally instead of a witness. This is insane, Noah said quietly. You're asking me to become exactly what I spent 3 months helping the FBI stop. I'm asking you to be practical, to recognize that idealism doesn't pay for your daughter's violin lessons or her field trips to the aquarium, to understand that the world isn't divided into good people and bad people. It's divided into people who have what they need and people who are willing to do what it takes to get it. Kozlov leaned forward. You've already crossed lines you never thought you would cross, Mr. Hayes. You went undercover, you lied, you built relationships with people just to betray them. How is what I'm offering any different? Because I was trying to stop people from dying. You're trying to profit from it. And yet, people kept dying anyway. Your wife died despite your service to your country. People are dying right now while we have this conversation, and they'll keep dying whether I'm in business or not. The only question is whether you profit from the tragedy or remain a victim of it. Noah stood up, pushing his chair back with enough force to make it scrape loudly against the floor. I need time to think about this. Of course, you have 24 hours to make your decision. After that, the offer expires and we go our separate ways. Kozlov stood as well, buttoning his suit jacket with practiced precision. One more thing, Mr. Hayes. I meant what I said about your daughter. If you choose to walk away, I give you my word that she'll never be threatened by me or anyone in my organization. But if you choose to betray this meeting to the FBI, if you try to set up another trap, then all bets are off. Do we understand each other?" "Perfectly." Noah walked out of the building, climbed into his truck, and sat there for 10 minutes with his hands gripping the steering wheel so hard his knuckles went white. Everything Kozlov had said was designed to create doubt, to blur the lines between right and wrong, to make it seem like the only rational choice was to take the money and run. And the terrifying thing was, part of Noah could see the logic in it. $2 million would solve every problem he had. It would give Maddie opportunities he could never provide on a mechanic's salary. It would mean genuine security instead of the constant financial stress that had defined their lives since Sarah died. All it would cost was his soul. Noah started the truck and drove not toward his apartment, but toward Agent Monroe's office. If he was going to make this decision, he needed to do it with all the information available, and that meant telling Monroe everything about Sophia's visit, about Kozlov being alive, about the offer that had just been made. The FBI field office was mostly dark this late in the evening, but Monroe's car was still in the parking lot. Noah called her from the lobby, and she came down to meet him with an expression that shifted from surprise to concern the moment she saw his face. "Hayes, what's wrong?" "We need to talk, privately." 10 minutes later, they were in a secure conference room, and Noah was laying out everything. Sophia's visit, the meeting with Kozlov, the job offer, all of it. Monroe listened without interrupting, her expression growing darker with each detail. "He's alive," she said when Noah finished. "Jesus Christ, he's been alive this whole time, and we've had the case marked closed. The question is, what do we do about it?" Monroe stood up and paced the conference room, her mind clearly working through possibilities. "We set up another operation, use you to get to him. This time we'll be ready for his escape tactics. We'll have thermal imaging, multiple perimeter teams, air support if needed. We can catch him, Hayes. And if he slips away again, if he decides I'm more trouble than I'm worth and comes after Maddie, we'll provide protection. Real protection this time, not just surveillance. We can put you both in protective custody until when, Monroe? Until Kozlov's dead? Until every member of his organization is in prison? How long does Maddie live in a safe house, going to a new school, making no friends, living in fear?" Noah shook his head. "I can't do that to her. I won't." Monroe stopped pacing and looked at him with something like understanding in her eyes. "What are you saying, Hayes?" "I'm saying that maybe the only way to end this is to take Kozlov's offer. Take the money, disappear with Maddie to somewhere safe, and let you guys catch him on your own timeline without using us as bait. That's running away. That's letting him win. That's choosing my daughter's safety over fighting a war I can't win." Noah's voice was harder now, the decision crystallizing as he spoke it aloud. "You said it yourself 3 months ago. These organizations are like Hydra heads. Cut one off and 2 more grow back. Kozlov's going to rebuild his operation whether I help the FBI or not. The only variable is whether Maddie and I are safe while it happens." Monroe sat down heavily, and for a long moment neither of them spoke. Finally, she said quietly, "If you take that money, you become complicit in everything he does going forward. Every overdose, every life destroyed, you'll carry that weight." "I already carry that weight, Monroe. I carried it the day I couldn't save Sarah. I'll carry it for the rest of my life. But at least this way, my daughter survives to have a life. That has to count for something." "What if there's another option?" Monroe leaned forward, her eyes intense. "What if we fake your acceptance? You tell Kozlov yes, you start working with him, but you're feeding us information the whole time. We build a case that's ironclad, we take him down permanently, and you still get to keep the money as payment for your work as a federal asset." Noah had been expecting this pitch. It was the obvious play from the FBI's perspective, but he'd also learned enough over the past 3 months to know how it would end. "And when Kozlov figures out I'm FBI, not if, but when, what happens then? You swoop in with tactical teams again? We all cross our fingers and hope he doesn't have another escape plan prepared?" Noah shook his head. "I'm not doing it, Monroe. I'm not putting Maddie through that again. I'm done being your bait." "So you're just going to take blood money and run? That's your solution?" "That's my survival plan. There's a difference." Monroe stood up, her expression a mixture of disappointment and reluctant understanding. If you do this, I can't protect you. The moment you take money from Kozlov, you become a criminal in the eyes of federal law. If you ever come back to the U.S., if we ever catch you, you'll be prosecuted. I understand. And you're okay with that? With becoming exactly what you helped us fight against? Noah thought about Sarah, about the drugs that killed her, about every justification he'd used to convince himself he was one of the good guys. And then he thought about Maddie's smile, about her drawings taped to the refrigerator, about the way she'd waved goodbye just hours ago without knowing it might be the last time. I'm not okay with any of this, Noah said quietly, but I'm choosing my daughter over everything else. If that makes me a bad guy in your book, I'll live with it, because at least I'll be alive to live with it. Monroe walked to the door, then paused with her hand on the handle. For what it's worth, Hayes, I understand why you're doing this. If I had a kid, I'd probably make the same choice, but that doesn't make it right. I stopped caring about right and wrong the moment someone threatened my daughter. Now I only care about safe and unsafe. After Monroe left, Noah sat in the conference room for another hour, staring at the walls and accepting the full weight of the decision he'd just made. He was going to take Kozlov's money. He was going to disappear with Maddie to some country where the FBI couldn't touch them and Kozlov's organization couldn't find them. He was going to live the rest of his life knowing that he'd chosen survival over justice, safety over morality, his daughter's life over the principle of fighting back against the people who'd destroyed his wife. And he was going to have to live with that choice every single day. Noah pulled out his phone and typed a text to the number Sophia had used. I accept. When do we start? The response came within minutes. Tomorrow, 10 a.m., same location. Bring your daughter. You'll both need new passports and you'll be leaving the country immediately. Bring Maddie. Noah's stomach turned at the thought of taking her to meet Kozlov, of exposing her to the man who'd threatened her life. But it made sense from Kozlov's perspective. Having Maddie present ensured Noah couldn't betray the meeting to the FBI, couldn't turn it into another trap. She was both hostage and insurance policy. Noah drove home in a fog, his mind already shifting into the practical logistics of disappearing. He'd have to pack light, take only what would fit in a couple of suitcases, leave the apartment and everything in it behind, pull Maddie out of school without explanation, say goodbye to Mrs. Chen and Carl and everyone else who'd been part of their lives, all without telling them why or where they were going. And he'd have to figure out how to explain it all to Maddie in a way that didn't terrify her or make her understand the full weight of what her father had just agreed to do. When Noah got home, he found Maddie asleep on Mrs. Chen's couch, curled up under a blanket with her homework scattered on the coffee table. Mrs. Chen had fallen asleep in her armchair, the TV playing softly in the background. Noah gently scooped up his daughter, whispered his thanks to Mrs. Chen, and carried Maddie back to their apartment. He tucked her into bed, watching her sleep peacefully, unaware that tomorrow her entire life would change. And as Noah stood there in her doorway, he made a silent promise to her and to the memory of Sarah. He would keep Maddie safe, no matter what it cost him, no matter what compromises he had to make, no matter how far he had to run or what he had to become in the process. She would have a life. She would have opportunities. She would grow up safe and loved and free from the violence that had destroyed her mother. Even if it meant Noah Hayes would spend the rest of his life as a criminal, living in exile, carrying the weight of everything he'd become. The next morning, Noah woke Maddie early and told her they were going on an adventure. He kept his voice light and excited, selling it as a surprise trip, and Maddie's natural enthusiasm did the rest. She helped him pack 2 suitcases, chattering about where they might be going, guessing destinations with the boundless optimism of childhood. Are we going to Disney World? Or the beach? Oh, or maybe New York City. Emma went to New York and she said the buildings were so tall they touched the sky. It's a surprise, baby bird. You'll find out soon enough. At 9:45 a.m., Noah loaded the suitcases into his truck and helped Maddie climb into her booster seat. He took one last look at their apartment building, the peeling paint, the cracked concrete, the home that had sheltered them through the worst years of his life, and felt something twist in his chest. Then he started the truck and drove toward the abandoned office building, toward Kozlov's offer, toward a future he couldn't quite imagine, but knew would be nothing like the life he'd planned. The black Mercedes was already in the parking lot when they arrived, along with a white van with tinted windows. Sofia Cardenas stood beside the van, and when she saw Noah pull in with Maddie in the truck, her expression shifted to something almost sympathetic. "Mr. Hayes," she said as Noah climbed out, "and this must be Maddie." Maddie clung to Noah's hand, suddenly shy in the presence of a stranger. "Daddy? Who's that lady?" "This is Sophia. She's going to help us with our adventure." Kozlov emerged from the building, and despite everything, Noah felt his body tense at the sight of the man who'd threatened his daughter. But Kozlov's expression was different now. Not cold and calculating, but something almost gentle as he looked at Maddie. "Hello, Maddie," Kozlov said, crouching down to her level. "My name is Vincent. Your father and I are going to help you go somewhere safe and beautiful. Would you like that?" Maddie looked up at Noah, uncertain. "Daddy?" "It's okay, baby bird. We're going on a trip together. You, me, and these people who are going to help us." "But what about school? What about my field trip to the aquarium?" Noah's throat tightened. "We'll find aquariums where we're going, even better ones, I promise." The next hour was a blur of activity. Sophia took them into the van where a man with camera equipment took photographs for new passports. Kozlov provided them with new names, new identities. Noah became Nathan Harris. Maddie became Madison Harris. The passports were high-quality forgeries, indistinguishable from the real thing. While they waited for the documents to be finalized, Kozlov sat down with Noah and explained the logistics. They'd be flying to Costa Rica that evening, where Kozlov had connections who would help them establish new lives. The $2 million would be waiting in an account Noah could access once they arrived. They'd have a house, a car, everything they needed to start over. "One piece of advice," Kozlov said as they reviewed the paperwork. "Don't try to contact anyone from your old life. Not Mrs. Chen, not Agent Monroe, not anyone. The moment you reach out, you create a trail that law enforcement can follow. Your old life is over, Mr. Hayes. You need to let it go completely." "I understand. Do you? Because I've seen people try to maintain connections to their past, and it never ends well. You're choosing to disappear. That means everyone you knew believes you're gone. Let them mourn, let them move on, and you do the same." By 5 p.m., they were at a private airstrip on the outskirts of Atlanta, boarding a small jet that would take them to Costa Rica. Maddie was excited now, the adventure becoming real, the fear replaced by the thrill of flying on a private plane. She pressed her face against the window as they taxied down the runway, watching Atlanta disappear behind them. Noah sat beside her, holding her hand, and felt the weight of everything he was leaving behind. The apartment where Sarah had died, the grave where she was buried, the life he'd tried to build from the ashes of his military service, all of it vanishing below them as the plane climbed into the evening sky. But sitting beside him was the one thing that mattered more than all of it combined. His daughter, safe, alive, headed toward a future that wasn't defined by poverty and struggle and constant fear. Maybe that was enough. Maybe that was all anyone could ask for, to protect the people they loved, no matter what it cost. The flight took 4 hours, and by the time they landed in Costa Rica, it was late at night. A car was waiting for them, a SUV with a driver who spoke minimal English but knew exactly where to take them. They drove through dark roads lined with jungle vegetation, the air thick and humid even at midnight, until they reached a house on a hillside overlooking the Pacific Ocean. It was beautiful in a way that made Noah's chest ache. Modern and spacious, with wide windows that would provide stunning views in the daylight. Furnished completely, stocked with food and supplies, ready for them to simply move in and start living. "This is ours?" Maddie asked, her exhaustion temporarily forgotten as she explored the rooms. "We get to live here?" "Yes, baby bird. This is our new home." "It's like a palace. Daddy, there's a pool in the backyard. Can we go swimming tomorrow?" "We'll see. First we need to sleep. It's been a very long day." Noah tucked Maddie into bed in a room that was easily twice the size of her bedroom in Atlanta, watching as her eyes grew heavy despite her excitement. Within minutes, she was asleep, her stuffed bunny clutched to her chest, her new life already beginning even as she dreamed. Noah walked out to the terrace, looking at the dark ocean in the distance, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the jungle at night. Somewhere back in Atlanta, Agent Monroe was probably filing reports, noting that Noah Hayes and his daughter had disappeared. Mrs. Chen would wonder why they hadn't said goodbye. Carl would have to hire another mechanic to cover the suddenly vacant position. And Sarah's grave would go unvisited, flowers wilting in the Georgia sun with no one to replace them. Noah pulled out his new phone, provided by Kozlov, completely untraceable, and almost called Monroe. Almost broke Kozlov's rule about maintaining contact. Almost tried to explain that he'd made the only choice he could live with, but he didn't. Because Kozlov was right, the past was over. Noah Hayes was gone. In his place was Nathan Harris, a man with no history, no military service, no dead wife, no connection to the FBI or to criminal organizations, or to anything except the 7-year-old girl sleeping peacefully in the next room. Over the next several weeks, Noah, Nathan now, he had to remember that, built a new life. He enrolled Maddie in an international school where she thrived among other expatriate children. He learned Spanish from a tutor Kozlov had arranged. He explored the local area, finding beaches and rainforests and small towns that felt like they existed outside of time. The money arrived as promised, sitting in an offshore account that would generate enough interest to support them comfortably for years. Nathan didn't have to work, but he found a small garage in a nearby town where he could fix cars and maintain some sense of purpose. The owner didn't ask questions about his past, and Nathan didn't volunteer information. Maddie adapted with the resilience of childhood. She made friends at school, learned Spanish faster than Nathan, and slowly stopped asking when they were going back to Atlanta. The scary night faded into distant memory, replaced by swimming lessons and birthday parties and field trips to actual rainforests that made the aquarium seem boring by comparison. 6 months after arriving in Costa Rica, Nathan took Maddie to a beach for her 8th birthday. They built sandcastles and hunted for shells and watched the sunset paint the sky in colors that seemed impossible. And as they sat there with the waves lapping at their feet, Maddie said something that made Nathan's heart both break and heal at the same time. "I like our new life, Daddy. Is it okay that I like it better than the old one?" "Of course it's okay, baby bird. That's what I wanted, for you to be happy. I miss Mrs. Chen sometimes, and my old school, but here feels more like home. Does that make sense?" "Perfect sense. Do you think Mommy would like it here?" The question caught Nathan off guard, but he recovered quickly. "I think your mom would love seeing you this happy. That's all she ever wanted." Maddie leaned against him, and they sat there in comfortable silence as the sun finished setting, and Nathan allowed himself to believe for just a moment that he'd made the right choice, that survival and safety were more important than justice and principle, that protecting his daughter justified every compromise he'd made. But late at night, when Maddie was asleep and Nathan sat alone on the terrace with a beer and his thoughts, he couldn't escape the truth. He'd become what he'd fought against. He'd taken blood money and run. He'd chosen personal safety over collective justice. And somewhere back in the United States, Kozlov's organization was continuing to operate, continuing to destroy lives, continuing to produce the same kind of drugs that had killed Sarah. And Nathan had walked away from it all to save one child, his child, while countless others suffered. Was it worth it? He didn't know. Some nights he convinced himself that saving Maddie justified everything. Other nights he lay awake wondering if he'd sold his soul for nothing more than a comfortable prison. But every morning, when Maddie woke up with a smile and ran to hug him, asking what adventure they'd have that day, Nathan knew he'd make the same choice again. Over and over, in every timeline, in every universe, he would choose his daughter. Because heroes didn't always win. They didn't always get the girl, or save the day, or see justice triumph. Sometimes heroes just did what they could to protect the people they loved, even if it meant becoming something less than heroic in the process. Sometimes heroes just became fathers. And maybe, Nathan thought as he watched his daughter grow up safe and happy in their Costa Rican paradise, maybe that was enough. A year after they'd disappeared, Nathan received a message on his encrypted phone. Just a news article, forwarded from an anonymous sender, about the arrest of Vincent Kozlov in Miami. The FBI had finally caught him, built a case based on evidence from multiple sources, and this time there would be no escape. Kozlov was looking at life in prison. The article mentioned that Kozlov's cooperation had led to the arrests of several other key figures in the cartel's operations. The network was collapsing, the organization dismantled from within. It was the kind of victory that Monroe had been working toward for years. Nathan read the article twice, then deleted it, wondering if Monroe had been the anonymous sender, wondering if this was her way of telling him that his sacrifice, if it could be called that, had ultimately contributed to the larger goal. That by taking himself off the board, he'd allowed the FBI to focus on Kozlov directly, without worrying about protecting civilian assets. He would never know for sure. And maybe that was okay. That evening, Nathan took Maddie to a local restaurant that served fresh-caught fish and had tables right on the beach. They ate dinner as the sun set, talking about her day at school, about the science project she was working on, about normal things that normal families talked about. "Daddy," Maddie said as they were finishing dessert, "do you ever miss home?" "I'm home," Nathan replied, reaching across to squeeze her hand. "Wherever you are, that's home. Even if we never go back to Atlanta?" "Even if we never go back to Atlanta." Maddie smiled, satisfied with the answer, and went back to her ice cream. And Nathan sat there watching her, this beautiful child who'd somehow survived everything the world had thrown at her, and felt something close to peace. He wasn't a hero. He wasn't even a good man by most standards. He'd taken money from criminals, fled from justice, and built a new life on a foundation of compromises and moral flexibility that would have disgusted the younger version of himself. But his daughter was safe. She was happy. She was growing up in a world where she didn't have to worry about bill collectors or scary nights, or her father disappearing into dangerous situations. And in the end, maybe that was the only victory that mattered. The sun finished setting over the Pacific, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that seemed like a benediction. Somewhere across the ocean, in a country Nathan could no longer call home, Agent Monroe was probably celebrating Kozlov's arrest. Mrs. Chen was probably making dinner in her small apartment. Carl was probably locking up the garage for the night. Life continued without them. The world kept turning. Justice and injustice balanced each other out in ways too complex to fully understand. And on a beach in Costa Rica, a man who used to be Noah Hayes held his daughter's hand and watched the night arrive, knowing that he'd traded everything for this moment and would do it again without hesitation. Because some stories didn't end with the bad guys in prison and the heroes celebrated. Some stories just ended with a father and daughter, safe and together, building a life from the ruins of everything they'd lost. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough.